Chapter 3449. Although the heavenly smelting divine craftsman purposely infuriated Jiang Tianyi and forced Jiang Tianyi to become enemies with Bai Feng, causing Bai Feng to be extremely dissatisfied, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman was like a fox assuming the tiger's might. However, there was no turning back. Bai Feng had already brought people to surround the palace of heaven's will. Naturally, she would not let him off so easily. In addition, Jiang Tianyi's attitude was very arrogant and he even threatened him in front of everyone. Even more so, he could not shrink back. Otherwise, he would lose all of his dignity as an area master. Jiang Tianyi stared at Bai Feng and said in a solemn tone, "This king's name is Tianyi, surname Jiang." Bai Feng's eyes narrowed when she heard the word Jiang. Her heart skipped a beat and she had a bad feeling about this. He glared at Jiang Tianyi and asked in a low voice, "What do you mean?" Without waiting for Jiang Tianyi to reply, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman laughed wildly and said, "Ha! Too laughable. Look at you putting on an act, you really think you're something. Jiang Tianyi? What kind of lousy name was that? This prince has never heard of it before. Even if you have some fame in other regions, this is the Fire Mulberry region. White Phoenix region lord has the final say. Do you think you can intimidate Domain Lord White Phoenix with just your name? Do you think White Phoenix Domain Lord is a 3-year-old child?" The heavenly smelting divine craftsman pointed at Jiang Tianyi and scolded arrogantly, "Little brat, don't even think about threatening Domain Lord Bai Feng, even if you were a Domain Lord." In the eyes of the 200,000 soldiers and several hundred divine lords, there was nothing wrong with the heavenly smelting divine craftsman's attitude. As citizens of the Fire Mulberry domain, they naturally had to protect Domain Lord White Phoenix and fight against Jiang Tianyi together. However, no one would have thought that Bai Feng was already unable to restrain her anger. She wanted nothing more than to tear the divine craftsman's mouth apart. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman's intentions were too obvious. He was forcing Bai Feng and Jiang Tianyi to become enemies, not giving them any chance to ease the tension between them. "Tianyi, shut up." Bai Feng was at the end of her patience and she shouted angrily with a dark face. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman smiled awkwardly and nodded in agreement. Jiang Tianyi glanced at the heavenly smelting divine craftsman with a mocking gaze and sneered, "Old thing, you're finished." After saying that, he ignored the heavenly smelting divine craftsman's venomous gaze and continued to speak to Bai Feng. "I come from the heavenly south and live in the divine attraction grotto heaven. I am now the Jiang clan's 7th young master." Jiang Tianyi believed that Bai Feng should have understood by now. This was indeed the case. Bai Feng immediately frowned and her pupils constricted. Dense shock flashed in her eyes. The Jiang clan of the divine attraction paradise? The others did not understand. Ordinary god kings did not understand. However, Bai Feng knew very well what this meant. "My guess is right. It is indeed the Jiang clan." No wonder he could ruthlessly humiliate the heavenly smelting divine craftsman with such an arrogant attitude. The Jiang clan. One of the ancient clans, one of the clans that is most proficient in the art of refining. Their strength is immeasurable. Bai Feng muttered to herself with a rather solemn expression. She was hesitating and weighing the pros and cons in her heart. In fact, he was also a disciple of an ancient clan. He came from the divine Phoenix Grotto heaven and was a descendant of the Phoenix race. It was precisely because of this that he knew better than anyone just how powerful and terrifying the ancient clans were. Even though the present boundless heaven continent was ruled by the Azura God Emperor, the Emperor Lord revered by billions of living beings. However, the foundation and status of the 18 ancient clans were not inferior to the Azura God Emperor. Most of the time, the Azura God Emperor was also wary of the ancient clans and was not willing to easily interfere in the grudges between the ancient clans. Furthermore, the 18 ancient clans also had a corresponding tacit understanding and agreement between themselves. Ever since the Azura God Emperor unified boundless heaven continent, the various ancient clans became even more united and formed an alliance. Only in this way would they not be disintegrated, divided, and ultimately subdued by the Azura God Emperor. Bai Feng had some understanding of the Jiang clan, so she stared at Jiang Tianyi and observed carefully. Jiang Tianyi's appearance and bloodline aura showed that he was indeed a disciple of the Jiang clan. Bai Feng had to consider how to deal with this matter. The other party was a disciple of the Jiang clan and the most outstanding young genius. Of course, she could not easily become enemies with him. Otherwise, the Jiang clan and the Phoenix race would become enemies because of this and affect the unity of the ancient clan alliance. If the Phoenix race pursued the matter, he, as the Fire Mulberry region lord, would bear the brunt and definitely be severely punished. However, the current situation was very awkward. Both sides were at daggers drawn. As the Fire Mulberry region lord, he could not take the initiative to back down and admit defeat. Otherwise, not only would it damage the Phoenix race's reputation, but it would also damage the region lord's dignity and make him a laughingstock. Bai Feng was still considering how to resolve the situation in front of her without hurting the harmony and losing face. However, when the heavenly smelting divine craftsman saw that she was hesitating, he had a bad feeling and was filled with anxiety. Damn it! Bai Feng is actually frightened? Could it be that the brat's background is really very strong? This won't do. I cannot let Bai Feng back down. Otherwise, how can I have a chance to take revenge? Furthermore, I have already become enemies with Jiang Tianyi. Even if I don't take revenge on him, he definitely won't let me off. Thinking of this, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman made a decision. He laughed disdainfully and pointed at Jiang Tianyi and mocked, "Brat, what's so great about having the surname Jiang? Just in this flowing river pass, I can find a few thousand people with the surname Jiang for you. I don't care what kind of backing or background you have. Today you must be investigated by White Feng region lord. As long as you collude with those fugitives, you should be punished as well." White Feng region lord was personally appointed by His Majesty the God Emperor. No matter how strong your backing is, can it be stronger than His Majesty the God Emperor? Not only did you disobey the investigation, you even threatened the region lord. Such actions are going against His Majesty the God Emperor's rule. It is equivalent to rebellion. Following the heavenly smelting divine craftsman's voice, it spread throughout the entire flowing river pass. The 200,000 soldiers and hundreds of god monarchs all expressed their agreement. Everyone was agitated and felt a strong sense of pride in their hearts. Even the Fire Mulberry Emperor was incited. Only Qin Yi and Wu Shui realized that something was wrong. They kept staring at Bai Feng's reaction, waiting for his orders. Seeing that the soldiers' fighting spirit had been ignited, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman no longer hesitated and shouted loudly, "Soldiers, protect the Fire Mulberry region. It is time to be loyal to His Majesty the God Emperor. Break into the bandits' palace and help the region lord and lord messenger search for the fugitives. Kill." Following his order, the 100,000 soldiers surrounding the Palace of Heavens could no longer suppress their fighting spirit and killing intent. They all waved their swords and sabers and attacked. Swish, 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 rumble, rumble. In the next moment, hundreds of thousands of light blades and divine art shadows flooded the Palace of Heavens like a flood. The terrifying divine art torrent fiercely bombarded the Golden Palace, producing a deafening sound. The soldiers' fighting spirit surged as they attacked without caring about their own safety. However, Bai Feng was shocked and angry. He glared at the heavenly smelting divine craftsman and shouted angrily, "Bastard! This king will not forgive you for acting on your own initiative." The heavenly smelting divine craftsman's thoughts had been seen through, so he naturally felt guilty. However, what was done could not be undone. The war had already begun and he had achieved his goal. Facing Bai Feng's reprimand, he sneered in his heart, but he pretended to be innocent. "Region Lord, I only stood out to say a few words of justice to protect you and His Majesty the God Emperor's dignity. Don't accuse me wrongly. Look, the soldiers are all filled with righteous indignation. They are willing to risk their lives for you." Chapter 3450. Divine King White Phoenix nearly vomited blood. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman's intentions were clear, but he still pretended to be innocent and loyal. If not for everyone present, Divine King White Phoenix really wanted to cripple him. Since the battle had begun, White Phoenix and the Jiang clan had already become enemies. He could only make the best of it. As the ruler of a region, the greatest taboo was to be overcautious and indecisive. However, Divine King White Phoenix was not willing to be used by the heavenly smelting divine craftsman like this and would not charge forward. He pointed at the Palace of Heavens amidst the divine art torrent and ordered the heavenly smelting divine craftsman, "Didn't you want to kill your enemy? Now that he's in front of you, go kill him. If you can't kill him, this king will kill you." The heavenly smelting divine craftsman immediately trembled in fright. He knew that he was too hasty and had already offended Divine King White Phoenix. But he did not expect Divine King White Phoenix to be so angry. This made him have to guess and mutter, "The matter is actually so serious? That Jiang Brat's backer is so powerful that even White Phoenix is afraid? So, then if I kill him I will definitely suffer the Jiang clan's revenge." At this moment the heavenly smelting divine craftsman felt a little regretful. After all, he was also afraid that the Jiang clan's power was too great. He could not withstand the Jiang clan's revenge at all. But an arrow on the bow had to be shot. Divine King White Phoenix stared at him and kept urging him. Seeing that he was still hesitating and considering, Divine King White Phoenix actually took out a divine saber, his entire body bursting with fierce killing intent. Looking at that posture, if he still did not attack Jiang Tianyi, Divine King White Phoenix would start with him. Helpless, the heavenly smelting divine craftsman could only brace himself, take out a divine spear and attack the palace of heaven's will. Kill. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman roared. Holding the scarlet divine spear with both hands, he stabbed out 81 times consecutively, attacking the palace of heaven's will. At this time the palace of heaven's will was enduring the furious attacks of 100,000 defenders and was violently shaking. The palace of heaven's will had many defensive arrays, and all of them were activated, forming 4 layers of incomparably thick shields. Hundreds of thousands of divine art attacks, like a storm, struck the 5-colored shields, creating deafening explosions, but ultimately failed to break through the shields. As for the divine palace within the shield, it was completely unscathed. Jiang Tianyi flew out of the divine palace and did not need the protection of the defensive array. His entire body was glowing with dark golden divine light. He wore a magnificent golden divine armor and stood in the dusky sky. No matter how many attacks landed on his body, they couldn't hurt him at all. He held a pitch-black meteoric iron divine bow in his left hand, while he took out talismans one after another in his right hand. These talismans turned into silver arrows and shot towards the crowd around him. Boom! Every single silver arrow that flew out was like a shooting star that fell into the battle formation of the defending army. It erupted with silver divine flames that covered the heavens and the earth, and it erupted with an enormous explosion that shook the heavens and the earth. The power of each arrow was enough to destroy everything within a radius of a few thousand miles. The destructive power was extremely terrifying. The arrows exploded in the crowd, and the silver divine flames instantly engulfed hundreds and thousands of defenders, reaping one life after another. Any defender that was engulfed by the silver divine flames was burned to ashes and dregs. Not even a single bone was left. Even the divine lords in the battle formation would die on the spot after being engulfed by the silver divine flames, let alone the majority of celestial gods. Apart from divine kings, no one could block his divine arrows. Boom boom boom. At this moment, the 81 spear lights shot out by the divine craftsman struck the divine palace of heaven's will's barrier with an earth-shattering explosion. The spear lights shattered, but the barrier remained intact. It was simply too difficult for the divine craftsman, a lesser divine king, to break through a mid-king level defensive array with his strength. The divine craftsman was very unconvinced, so he used all his strength to attack the divine palace of heaven's will. But the result was the same. The barrier of divine light that seemed to be only 2 feet thick was still intact. Jiang Tianyi had already shot out more than 200 arrows, slaughtering 34,000 defenders. In just a few dozen breaths, a third of the army of 100,000 had been slaughtered. Such ferocious divine might not only intimidated the surviving 60,000 defenders, but it also filled them with fear. Even divine King White Phoenix, Qin Yi Wuxia, and the others had grave and sinister expressions. Damn it! We have to hold him back or else the army of 100,000 won't be enough to kill him. Divine King White Phoenix frowned and gave the order. Qin Yi Wuxia and Emperor Huasong acknowledged the order at the same time. They waved their weapons and attacked Jiang Tianyi. 6 gods domineering blade. Red lotus sky opening strike. Mountain shattering divine sword. The 3 used all their strength and used powerful killing moves to attack Jiang Tianyi from different directions. The divine craftsman saw that continuing to attack the divine palace of heaven's will was futile, so he turned and attacked Jiang Tianyi. Stormwind fire spear. Heavenly smelting divine craftsman roared angrily. He held the divine spear with both hands and stabbed out spear shadows that filled the sky. He released dozens of laws and divine powers, forming wind, fire and lightning that filled the sky. Jiang Tianyi could ignore the attacks of tens of thousands of soldiers and focus on killing the defenders. However, he couldn't ignore the attacks of 3 divine kings and a peak divine lord. Facing the divine arts of the 4 experts, he flipped the meteoric metal divine bow in his left hand and released pitch-black ripples that expanded like a whirlpool. He threw out a giant palm with his right hand and clashed with the 4 experts. Boom, boom, boom. In the next moment, a deafening muffled sound burst out and resounded through the sky. The divine spells of the 4 powerhouses were all shattered by the giant golden palm. The destructive shockwaves were absorbed by the mysterious ripples and merged into 4 water tank-sized light balls that flew back at an even faster speed toward the divine craftsman Qin Yi and the others. Such a situation caused the 4 experts to be horrified. They didn't expect Jiang Tianyi to react so quickly and have such rich battle experience. He used one move to not only resolve their attacks but also counterattack. This was truly frightening. The divine craftsman Qin Yi and the others all defended as if they were facing a great enemy. All kinds of defensive shields, armors and defensive secret techniques were used. Bang, 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 bang. Emperor Huasong was the first to be sent flying. Although he had raised his defense to the extreme, he was still a peak divine lord. The difference in strength between him and a middle-level divine king was too great. The power of that colorful ball of light had long since exceeded the limits of what he could endure. When he was hit, he didn't even have the slightest resistance and was sent flying hundreds of miles away with blood spurting out of his 7 orifices. Not only were his arms broken, but there was also a big hole in his chest. Blood kept coming out of his mouth. Emperor Huasong only felt a lingering fear after suffering such a serious injury. He was glad that he had survived the disaster. It's too scary. Fortunately, I defended with all my strength and survived. Otherwise, I would have been killed instantly. Sogu. Chapter 3451. Emperor Huasong was well aware. With his strength in front of Jiang Tianyi, he could not even withstand one move. If he braced himself and charged forward to fight, he would only end up turning into ashes. Therefore, he took the opportunity of being heavily injured, his hair disheveled, face covered in blood, and rushed in front of Bai Feng. Domain Lord, subordinate. Subordinate is no match for that Jiang clan thief. He is at least a middle-level god king. Emperor Huasong did not tidy up his ragged clothes and hair, nor did he wipe away the blood on his face, looking very miserable and disheveled. Even when he spoke, he was at his last gasp, looking like he would not live for long. Divine King Bai Feng glanced at him, waved his hand and said, "Since you are heavily injured, then withdraw and heal." Emperor Huasong was naturally happy that Domain Lord did not send him to his death. But he was rather smart, bowed and thanked and said in a firm tone, "Domain Lord, although subordinate is heavily injured, the soldiers are still fighting a bloody battle. How can subordinate cower? Even if subordinate is heavily injured, subordinate also has to contribute to Domain Lord. Subordinate will go to the star-killing array, personally preside over the operation of the grand array, and assist Domain Lord to kill the enemy." Emperor Huasong would do this. Divine King Bai Feng was not surprised. After all, Emperor Huasong was promoted by him, he knew him very well. "Right you go." Divine King Bai Feng nodded in agreement. Emperor Huasong acknowledged the order, hurriedly bowed and retreated, flying towards the divine array 4,000 miles away. Until now, he dared to circulate his skill to suppress his injuries, hurriedly consumed a divine pill to heal. On the other side, divine craftsman Sky Smelting, Qin Yi, and Wuxia had been trying their best to besiege Jiang Tianyi, but ultimately had no effect. Although Qin Yi and Wuxia were middle-level god kings, they were only 4th-level god king realm. Not to mention divine craftsman Sky Smelting, he was just a 3rd-degree realm low-level god king. And Jiang Tianyi was the leader among middle-level god kings, his strength reached 6th-level god king realm. Divine craftsman Sky Smelting was obsessed with the path of refining, his combat power was not outstanding. No matter how he attacked with all his strength, it was no different from scratching an itch to Jiang Tianyi. Qin Yi and Wu Shui's attacks could barely threaten Jiang Tianyi. But Jiang Tianyi could resolve their besiegement with a little trick. The two sides fought for 100 breaths of time, but Jiang Tianyi was still unharmed. On the other hand, divine craftsmen Tianyi, Qin Yi and Wu Shui were all heavily injured. This was especially true for the divine blacksmith, who had been heavily taken care of by Zhou Xian. He had long been beaten beyond recognition and was covered in blood. If not for divine King White Phoenix watching from afar, he would have had thoughts of retreating long ago and wanted to withdraw from the battle circle. He felt that if this continued he would soon be killed by Zhou Xian. There was nothing he could do. Zhou Xian was targeting him too much. During the battle, there were clearly better opportunities to heavily injure Qinyi or Wuxia. But Zhou Xian wanted to deal with him. On the surface, it looked like the three of them were attacking Zhou Xian. Everyone was putting in the same amount of effort and danger. But in reality Qinyi and Wuxia were relatively safe. He was in the most dangerous situation. The two sides fought for a while and the heavenly smelting divine craftsman's injuries became even more miserable. Not only was his left arm chopped off, but there were also dozens of bloody holes in his chest and back. His internal organs and blood were flowing out together. Not only did he look miserable but his strength had also greatly decreased and he only had about 50% of his combat strength left. Under such circumstances he could not hold on anymore. But he did not dare to turn around and flee. He could only seek help from divine King White Phoenix not far away. "Domain Lord, Your Excellency, save me. This guy's strength is too strong. If you still don't make a move, not only will I be killed by him, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers will also die. Your Excellency, it's nothing if I die in battle for you. But those hundreds of thousands of soldiers are all your most loyal subjects." The heavenly smelting divine craftsman's voice was very loud, spreading throughout the entire flowing Chuan Pass. Not only did the remaining 40,000 defending troops on the battlefield hear it, the 100,000 defending troops around flowing Chuan Pass also heard it clearly. Everyone's gazes gathered on divine King White Phoenix. That's right, Zhou Xian's strength was terrifyingly powerful. An entire 100,000 defending troops besieged him, but in such a short time, more than half of them were slaughtered by him. Heavenly smelting Qinyi and Wuxia besieged him with all their might but could not do anything to him. Instead they were beaten until their injuries were miserable. The defending troops' morale was low, everyone on tenterhooks. If divine King White Phoenix still did not make a move, the hundreds of thousands of defending troops would probably be discouraged. Now the heavenly smelting divine craftsman was shouting at the top of his lungs again. He even said that it was fine if he died but did not want the hundreds of thousands of soldiers to die. This was equivalent to threatening White Phoenix in front of everyone. If he still did not make a move, he was ignoring the hundreds of thousands of soldiers. "You damned dog. Too despicable." White Phoenix was so angry that even his face turned green, roaring furiously in his heart. He really wanted to kill the heavenly smelting divine craftsman. But with hundreds of thousands of soldiers watching, not only could he not do so, but he also could not show his anger. "Soldiers, no matter how strong the enemy is, with this king here he will definitely die." Divine King White Phoenix shouted, his left hand forming a divine seal, his right hand waving a divine saber attacking Zhou Xian. "Thief, take this king's saber." Divine King White Phoenix finally made a move. Heavenly Phoenix Moon slashing saber. At this moment, divine flames surged from his body, forming the image of 1,000 feet tall fire phoenix behind him. The scarlet divine saber in his hand also slashed out a divine saber beam that was hundreds of thousands of feet long. The saber beam was like blood, tearing through the night, carrying close to 200 types of laws and divine power as it slashed toward Zhou Xian with a momentum that could destroy everything. Before the saber beam arrived, the world changed color. The already dark sky turned completely pitch black. Only the 5-colored divine light and blood-colored divine flames were left in the world. An incomparable pressure instantly enveloped Zhou Xian, causing his back to turn cold and his heart to fill with dread. In comparison, the combined forces of heavenly smelting Qinyi, Wuxia and the 100,000 defending troops were inferior to divine King White Phoenix alone. The pressure he felt was even greater. He did not doubt that if divine King White Phoenix's saber strike hit him, he would be killed instantly. Even if he was not killed on the spot, he would be severely injured and his strength would plummet. At the critical moment, he did not hesitate to give up chasing the heavenly smelting divine craftsman and wanted to retreat. However, the entire brimming Chuan Pass was sealed by several divine arrays. The space within 5,000 miles was sealed, making it impossible for him to teleport. His flying speed was also several times lower than usual. There was no way to dodge Divine King White Phoenix's saber strike. Helpless, Jiang Tianyi could only use all his strength to defend with all his might. Not only did he form a divine light shield, the divine armor he wore also activated an array. At the same time he held the heavens will divine bow and shot 6 arrows at Divine King White Phoenix. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The 6 arrows tore through the night sky like meteors, instantly striking the saber beam with deafening booms. However, all the arrows collapsed but the saber beam was undamaged. Its speed and power were only reduced by 30%. The next instant, the saber beam drowned Jiang Tianyi's figure and struck him. Chapter 3452. Bam! Amidst a deafening explosion, Jiang Tianyi was sent flying backwards. The multicolored divine light shield collapsed, splashing out fragments that blotted out the sky and covered the sun. The golden divine armor he was wearing had deep dents on his shoulders and chest. He was still flying in the night sky and his face was pale. Blood was flowing out of his nose and mouth. Even though he was at the 6th level of the Divine King realm, he could easily kill Tianyi, Qingyi and Wuxia. However, there was still a big gap between him and a 7th level Divine King. Divine King White Phoenix injured him with her first move. Even though it was only a light injury, he was sent flying dozens of miles away. He looked quite miserable. The hundreds of thousands of soldiers who were originally low in morale cheered excitedly. Their morale was back to its peak. Not only the tens of thousands of soldiers who were fighting, even the 100,000 soldiers who were guarding the divine array around Manchuan Pass were excited. Taking this opportunity, the Emperor of Fire Mulberry Tree hurriedly led the divine monarchs and shouted in admiration, "The Domain Lord is mighty." The Emperor of Fire Mulberry Tree led the cheers and the tens of thousands of soldiers echoed. Soon hundreds of thousands of people shouted in unison. A deafening sound wave spread throughout a radius of several tens of thousands of miles, shaking until the entire flowing creek pass started trembling. At this moment, Divine King White Phoenix's majesty was undeniable. Qingyi and Wu Shui did not dare to delay and continued to attack Jiang Tianyi. Tianyi Divine Craftsman took this opportunity to retreat 1,000 miles away. He hurriedly took a divine pill and healed himself. Divine King White Phoenix was not in a hurry to kill Jiang Tianyi. She glanced at Tianyi Divine Craftsman coldly and a cold light flashed in her eyes. She had decided that after she finished off Jiang Tianyi tonight, she would not let Tianyi Divine Craftsman off. This old thing has been domineering in the Fire Mulberry Tree region for nearly 10,000 years. How dare you play tricks in front of me? If I don't teach you an unforgettable lesson, how can you control the billions of people in the future? At this moment, Jiang Tianyi resisted the attacks of the 40,000 soldiers and 2 divine kings while he shouted angrily at Divine King White Phoenix. "White Phoenix, do you really want to take revenge for the heavenly smelting divine craftsman and kill me? Are you sure you want to be enemies with the Jiang clan?" Jiang Tianyi's expression and eyes were as dark as ice and sharp. A long time ago he had even promised Ji Tianxing that with the Jiang clan's power and foundation, Bai Feng would definitely give him face. He did not expect that after he revealed his identity, the White Phoenix Divine King still made a move to attack. Bai Feng did not give him any face at all, nor did she care about the Jiang clan's deterrence. This caused him to be abnormally ashamed and angry, and his heart was truly filled with killing intent. However, Divine King White Phoenix stared at him expressionlessly and said in a low voice, "Jiang Tianyi, no matter who you are, I am only following orders. So what if he offended the Jiang clan? This king is working for the Celestial Aspect Ambassador, serving His Majesty the God Emperor. If you had allowed me to search the palace, how could things have developed to this point?" Divine King White Phoenix's original intention was not to become enemies with the Jiang clan. But now that things had come to this, it was too late to say anything. In front of hundreds of thousands of soldiers he could not shrink back either. Otherwise, it would prove that he was afraid of the Jiang clan, and his dignity as a region lord would be gone. Jiang Tianyi nodded and said with a cold smile, "Very good. Bai Feng, since you are so vicious and vicious, then there's nothing to say. If I die in battle here tonight, you and the Phoenix clan will not be able to escape responsibility. Just wait to suffer the Jiang clan's wrath." As he said, he took out a transmission jade slip from his interspatial ring and entered a message inside. He wanted to report tonight's matter to the Jiang clan. This way, even if he was unfortunately killed by the White Phoenix Divine King, The Jiang clan would also help him take revenge. Divine King White Phoenix was a wily old fox. The moment he saw Jiang Tianyi take out the transmission jade slip, he understood what he wanted to do. Immediately, Divine King White Phoenix's pupils constricted, his eyes flashing with cold, killing intent. Jiang Tianyi, if you cooperate with me, perhaps I won't be so ruthless. But if you do this, then don't blame me for cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots, eliminating future troubles forever. As he said that, Divine King White Phoenix waved his divine saber again and attacked Jiang Tianyi fiercely. He wanted to stop Jiang Tianyi from sending the message to prevent the Jiang clan from knowing about this. As long as the news did not spread, he could kill Jiang Tianyi quickly and hide it from everyone. 7 Heart Annihilation / Bai Feng held the divine saber with both hands as divine flames surged from his body. The Annihilation Divine Eye on his forehead also released dark red blood flames. Swoosh. The divine saber released a 10,000-meter saber light mixed with the mysterious Annihilation blood flames. It carried unparalleled power and a mysterious power that could destroy one's mind as it slashed toward Jiang Tianyi. At this moment, the saber light dyed flowing creek past the color of blood. The space within 10,000 miles also rippled violently as if it could not withstand the might of the divine saber and was about to collapse. Jiang Tianyi was under great pressure and could not move an inch. His body also became crooked. Bai Feng, you old bastard, the Jiang clan and you are irreconcilable. Jiang Tianyi had a bad premonition and even felt the aura of death descend. He roared furiously. However, he would not sit and wait for death. He ignored the tens of thousands of soldiers and the 2 divine kings and used all his strength to block Bai Feng. Boom. The next moment, the saber light slashed down and shattered Jiang Tianyi's divine light shield. Then the Tianyi divine bow in his hands was also sent flying by the saber light. He was about to be struck by the saber light again and be sent flying with heavy injuries. At this critical moment, a blinding white light suddenly appeared in front of Jiang Tianyi. It was a white light wall that was tens of thousands of feet tall and tens of thousands of feet wide. It was thick and sturdy. Boom. The saber light slashed the white light wall and exploded with an earth-shattering sound. Instantly, the saber light and the white light wall collapsed at the same time, exploding into billions of divine light shards that scattered in the night sky. Divine King White Phoenix's ultimate killing move was actually blocked. Jiang Tianyi was not injured. He was only pushed back tens of thousands of feet by the violent shockwave. This scene stunned him. Divine King Bai Feng, Qin Yi, Wu Shui, and the tens of thousands of soldiers also revealed stunned looks. No one could have thought that there was actually someone even stronger who made a move at the critical moment and saved Jiang Tianyi. Everyone turned their heads to look at Tianyi Palace. Their gazes gathered on a white figure at the palace's entrance. Jiang Tianyi came back to his senses and also turned his head to look at the divine palace's entrance. When he saw that white-robed figure clearly, he immediately frowned, his expression becoming very complicated. Young Master Tianxing? Indeed, it was him who saved me. But why can he appear at this time? Bai Feng made such a big fuss in order to intercept and kill him. Doesn't his appearance confirm that Bai Feng's guess was correct? Although Jiang Tianyi was saved by Ji Tianxing, he felt grateful and rejoiced in his heart. But he was even more worried in his heart. Tonight was definitely a situation where one party would not rest until one party died. Chapter 3453. Swish. Jiang Tianyi could not be bothered to heal his injuries. He quickly flew out of the palace and arrived in front of Ji Tianxing. Young Master Tianxing, why did you come out? They set up an ambush here to deal with you. Jiang Tianyi frowned and looked at Ji Tianxing, his voice filled with worry and urgency. Seeing his reaction, Ji Tianxing smiled and asked, "Don't you find it strange? Don't you want to know what grudges I have with Celestial Aspect Ambassador and Divine King White Phoenix?" Sigh. Jiang Tianyi could not help but sigh, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. What's the point of asking this now? Even if you don't have grudges with Celestial Aspect Ambassador, White Phoenix does not intend to let me go. Ji Tianxing nodded and said with a chuckle, "Kid, you're quite similar to your second uncle. However, you are already heavily injured and you still want to fight alone. Isn't that a bit too much? If I don't help, you will be heavily injured by White Phoenix again." Jiang Tianyi was temporarily speechless. After thinking about it seriously, it seemed like this was indeed the best solution. If Ji Tianxing did not appear, he would not be able to stop White Phoenix alone. and he would not be able to escape Flowing River Pass. Alright, then let's fight side by side and kill White Phoenix and this group of bastards. Zhang Tianyi quickly adjusted his mentality and regrouped. He extended his right hand and called back the divine bow that had fallen a few hundred miles away. Swish! The meteoric metal divine bow flew back to him. He grabbed it with his left hand and took out 4 talismans from his interspatial ring with his right hand, holding them between his fingers. As he circulated his divine power, the 4 talismans lit up with divine flames and turned into dazzling arrows. The bowstring was pulled to a full moon, and the 4 arrows were ready to shoot, rippling with a terrifying power that could destroy everything. Ji Tianxing also took out the Sword of Burial of Heaven and charged toward Divine King White Phoenix with soaring battle intent. Tianyi, leave White Phoenix to me. I'll leave the rest to you. As his voice fell, he had already turned into a dazzling meteor and attacked Divine King White Phoenix. Us. Zhang Tianyi was stunned. He looked left and right but did not see any other helpers. At this moment 4 figures walked out of the palace gate behind him. Heavens will God King, we are here to help you. Zhang Tianyi turned his head and saw that the 4 figures were 2 men and 2 women. He had seen 2 of the men on Mount Fire Dragon before. They were Chao Qingyu and Yank. As for the 2 ladies, one of them was wearing a long green dress. She was pretty and graceful and she was a first-level divine king. She was walking side by side with Chao Qingyu. It was Lon. On the other hand, there was a human woman wearing a silver nebula dress. She was unparalleled in her generation. Although she only had the strength of a 9th-level divine lord, she possessed a sacred and dignified aura. Her clear eyes were filled with calmness and wisdom. She held a divine sword in each hand, 1 gold and 1 silver. They were as dazzling as the sun and the moon, and they emitted the energy fluctuations of a king-grade mid-grade divine artifact. Moreover, Yank, Chao Qingyu and Lon seemed to treat her with respect. Zhang Tianyi knew at a glance that this devastatingly beautiful human woman was most likely Master Grandpa's Dao companion. He had such a guess in his heart, but he did not ask nor did he expose it. He nodded at the 4 of them and revealed a friendly smile. He said, "Many thanks everyone. Then let us fight side by side and kill our way out of Flowing River Pass." With that said, he held his bow and aimed at the tens of thousands of defenders 1,000 miles away. He instantly shot out 4 arrows. Whoosh! The 4 arrows tore through the night sky like meteors, instantly crossing 1,000 miles and descending on the heads of the tens of thousands of defenders. The arrows suddenly dispersed, blasting into the crowd. Boom! 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 Following 4 deafening booms, the defenders' battle formation erupted with starlight, blotting out the sky and blotting out the sun. At least 2,000 defenders were blown to smithereens on the spot, turning to dust. Zhang Tianyi did not waste time to see the result. The moment the 4 arrows were shot out, he took out 4 talismans and turned them into surveillance, shooting them at the defenders' battle formation. 2,000 miles away, Ji Tianxing and Divine King White Phoenix had already begun fighting. Divine King White Phoenix was extremely powerful, having the power to destroy heaven and earth with every move. She had also grasped hundreds of divine Dao laws and could be said to be ferocious and unpredictable. However, Ji Tianxing was fearless. He transformed into a 300-meter-tall golden-armored giant, wielding the Burial of Heaven and attacking wildly, clashing head-on with Divine King White Phoenix. He used hundreds of sword Dao techniques and various ultimate mystiques from time to time, but he was actually evenly matched with Divine King White Phoenix. In a short time it was difficult to determine the victor between the 2. They could only tangle. Of course, the shockwaves from their battles spread in all directions, enveloping the entire Flowing River Pass. The 40,000 defenders were affected, their numbers dropping sharply. In less than 30 seconds more than 10,000 were killed. Coupled with Zhang Tianyi's attacks from afar, nearly 10,000 were killed in 30 seconds. More than half of the defenders were killed, and the remaining 20,000 threw away their armor and fled to the edge of the battlefield in a sorry state. At this moment Chao Qingyu and Yank targeted Qin Yi, Wuxia and the sky-smelting divine blacksmith. The 5 of them began an intense battle. Lan and Yun Yao, on the other hand, held their divine weapons and chased after the defenders. How could the 20,000 defenders who had lost their will to fight withstand their slaughter? In less than a quarter of an hour the 20,000 survivors were slaughtered by the 2 of them. The inside of Flowing Creek Pass became empty. High in the sky, Ji Tianxing and Divine King White Phoenix fought fiercely. Their figures flickered and teleported, releasing destructive divine arts. Shockwaves spread out like ripples, constantly crashing into flowing river pass. The pass, which had a radius of 5,000 miles, was quickly reduced to ruins. Although it was almost impossible for Ji Tianxing to defeat White Phoenix, he could temporarily stall White Phoenix so that she couldn't attack Jiang Tianyi and the others. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Jiang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu, and Yank teamed up to deal with Qin Yi Wuxia and the sky-smelting divine blacksmith. The sky-smelting divine blacksmith was already severely injured and he was attacked by Jiang Tianyi. He didn't even last 15 minutes before he was killed by Jiang Tianyi's divine bow. Not only was his divine body reduced to ashes, but his divine spark was also shattered. Qin Yi and Wu Shui were also in a miserable state. Their injuries kept worsening and they were covered in blood. 15 minutes later, both of them were severely injured and shot by Jiang Tianyi a few more times. Their divine bodies were destroyed on the spot. The couple only had their divine sparks left. They retreated in panic and fled to the edge of the battlefield. Jiang Tianyi locked onto their divine sparks and kept shooting arrows, chasing after them in flowing river pass. At this time, Chao Qingyu and Yank went to help Lan'er and Yunyao deal with the 100,000 defenders around flowing river pass. They were scattered and there were a few hundred divine lords in the crowd, so it was difficult to deal with them. But Yank kept an eye on the emperor of Huasong country and charged forward recklessly. He was unstoppable. The emperor of Huasong country was already severely injured and couldn't resist at all. He could only dodge and escape. More than 100 imperial guards and divine lords of the Huasong country surrounded him to protect him. That was exactly what Yank wanted. Sword breaks 9 heavens, sword breaks 9 heavens. Chapter 3454. Yank was like a ferocious prehistoric beast. He was also like a killing machine that could destroy the heavens and earth. He caused a bloody storm in the battle formation. The 100-odd godly lords that were protecting Emperor Huasong were quickly killed by him. Even Emperor Huasong did not last long. He was killed by his fists and turned into ashes. Although Emperor Huasong was dead, the battle formation of the 100,000-strong army was not greatly affected. They were still guarding the bases of the various divine arrays and operating them with all their might to suppress Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, Yank and the others. As the 6 god formations revolved at high speed, the terrifying god power sealed the flowing river pass and severely weakened Ji Tianxing and the others' combat power. Everyone's speed slowed down significantly. They could not circulate their divine power smoothly and their movements were extremely inconvenient. Their combat strength was constantly decreasing. Originally, Ji Tianxing could still fight Bai Feng to a draw. But now he was gradually at a disadvantage and was in a passive situation. Soon he was injured by Bai Feng. After all, Ji Tianxing was only at the 2nd level of the Divine King realm. He was 5 levels lower than Divine King Bai Feng. It was only temporary that he could fight Bai Feng to a draw. It was all because of his rich combat experience and various divine powers. Now the 6 divine arrays were operating at full power and were suppressing him. They had weakened his combat strength by at least 20 to 30%. Under such circumstances he was no match for Bai Feng. Not only was he forced to retreat, but he was also exhausted from defending. His injuries were also worsening. Seeing that he was in a passive situation, he was in a sorry state. Chao Qingyu, Yunyao, Yank and the others all looked worried. Especially Yunyao. She subconsciously wanted to help Ji Tianxing. However, Lan'er hurriedly pulled her back. Chao Qingyu and Yank also persuaded her. Miss Yun, the battle between young Master Tianxing and Divine King Bai Feng is not something we can interfere with. If we forcefully help, not only will we not be able to help him, we will also be in danger and distract him. Miss Yun, don't worry. Young Master Tianxing will not be defeated so quickly. He should be able to hold on for a long time. Young Master already had a plan. He would hold back Divine King White Phoenix while we deal with the guards and divine arrays as soon as possible. Only in this way can we kill our way out of Flowing River Pass as quickly as possible and escape from danger. If we go to help the Lord, even if we can gain the upper hand, we will still waste time. The longer we wait, the more dangerous our situation will be. Who knows if that old fellow White Phoenix found other divine kings to help or not. After listening to the three's persuasion, Yunyao suppressed her worries and waved the sun and moon swords with all her might. She continued to slaughter the defenders and destroy the base of the divine array. Not long after, Jiang Tianyi flew back. Qin Yi and Wu Shui's godheads had already been killed by his divine bow. 2 mid-level god kings had perished, leaving behind only 30-odd shards of godhead. Jiang Tianyi looked at Ji Tianxing, who was in danger, and then looked at the 90,000 soldiers and the 200 high-level divine lords maintaining the divine formation. After a moment of consideration, he made up his mind. Kill those high divine lords first and destroy the ceiling divine formation. Only in this way can we lessen the pressure on young Master Tianxing and reduce it so that he can last longer. With that, he drew his bow and shot out a series of meteor arrows, attacking the high divine lords in all directions. His archery skills were extremely wondrous. None of his arrows missed within 10,000 miles. He was truly accurate. Against those high divine lords, his archery skills were unleashed to the extreme. His power was terrifying. Boom, boom, boom. As the arrows flew out like a string of pearls, the defenders bloomed with starlight. Divine flames soared into the sky and exploded with loud booms that shook the heavens. Every explosion of divine flames that soared into the sky represented the death of a few high-level divine lords. Dozens to hundreds of defenders were also affected and turned to ashes. Jiang Tianyi's archery skills were fast, vicious, and accurate. He specialized in killing the high divine lords maintaining the divine array. In less than 100 breaths of time, more than 60 high-level divine lords had been blasted into smithereens, along with more than 20,000 guards. Such a terrifying battle record filled the hearts of the other divine emperors and the defenders with fear. Many people lost their will to fight and were thinking of retreating. If they continued to defend their posts and maintain the divine array, they would be living targets that would be killed by Jiang Tianyi one by one. But if they retreated and abandoned the divine array, the power of the 6 divine arrays would be greatly reduced. By then, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and the others would be even stronger, and White Phoenix Realm Lord would be in danger. So, the tens of thousands of defenders and more than 100 high divine lords were stuck in a dilemma. This gave Jiang Tianyi, Yang Chao Qingyu, and the others an opportunity. The pressure on them was greatly reduced and they killed the defenders even more fiercely. Even though Yun Yao was the weakest, her fighting power was extremely strong. She was enveloped in dim moonlight, like a goddess descending from the heavens. Her aura was extremely sacred and cold. She swung the sun-moon swords with both hands as if she was holding the sun in her left hand and the moon in her right hand. The divine light of the sun-moon covered the sky. Swish, 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 swish. Thousands of sword auras of the sun-moon swords were 1,000 feet long and they landed lightly in the crowd. Following a series of loud rumbling noises, batch after batch of defenders were killed. Many defenders and high divine lords fought back with all their might and used all kinds of divine powers and techniques to drown her. But she swung her swords and formed a gold and silver net to protect herself. No matter how the defenders and high divine lords attacked, they couldn't hurt her at all. At first, Chao Qingyu, Yang, and Lan were still paying attention to her, worried that her life was in danger and they were ready to save her at any time. But when they saw that she was so powerful and her fighting power was as strong as Lan's, they were relieved. Unknowingly, another 15 minutes had passed. More than half of the 100,000 defenders supporting the divine arrays were killed. Only 40,000 people were left. 70% of the hundreds of divine lords were also killed. Only 70 high divine lords were still stubbornly holding on. Of the 6 divine formations operating at full power, 3 had already been affected. Without the support of a large number of defenders, these 3 divine arrays were operating on their own and their power was greatly reduced. As a result, the pressure on Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, Yun Yao, and the others was reduced. It looked like the 40,000 defenders wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer and would be wiped out soon. Even though Bai Feng had the upper hand and suppressed Ji Tianxing, beating Ji Tianxing until he was covered in wounds, she was extremely anxious. Damn it! How could the strength of these few foreign race divine kings be so formidable? This can't continue. When they kill all the defenders and then join forces to attack me, I'll be in danger. Bai Feng had a premonition of danger and she was also very angry. These foreign race godly kings actually have close ties with the Jiang clan. Not only did I offend the Jiang clan, but I also can't kill them. I've disappointed Divine Ambassador Xianxia. My forces have suffered heavy losses in this battle. Not only were 3 divine kings killed, But I also lost hundreds of elite experts and 200,000 elite soldiers. What a complete defeat. Sogu. Chapter 3455. In reality, Divine King White Phoenix had already lost. His two deputies Qin Yi and Wuxia had both perished. The heavenly smelting divine craftsman was killed. Fire Mulberry Emperor was also dead. Over 200 high-level divine lords, over 300 ordinary divine lords, as well as hundreds of thousands of elite soldiers, all sacrificed. Even if he could capture Ji Tianxing and the rest, this price was also too tragic. In the following few hundred years, it would be difficult for Fire Mulberry region to recover its vitality. Furthermore, Divine King White Phoenix had offended the Jiang clan and would definitely suffer the Jiang clan's revenge. Furthermore, Divine King White Phoenix did not have the confidence or hope to capture Ji Tianxing and the rest. Not only could he not capture them, his life would also be in danger. If he still did not change his strategy, he would get closer and closer to death. This king is the dignified Fire Mulberry region lord, a high-level divine king, a descendant of the Phoenix clan's bloodline. How could I fall to such a state? For a full 3,000 years, this is the first time this king feels the danger of death. White Phoenix laughed bitterly and coldly in his heart. His eyes were as cold as ice as he stared at Ji Tianxing, firmly memorizing his appearance as well as divine soul aura. Boy, who exactly are you? How are you related to the Jiang clan? White Phoenix suppressed Ji Tianxing and chased after him in the night sky as he asked solemnly. Ji Tianxing responded calmly from beginning to end, resolving his attacks again and again. He said with a cold smile, "You want to know the answer? Then surrender without a fight. This king will naturally tell you." Dream on. Divine King White Phoenix frowned coldly and mocked contemptuously, "You are not worthy to be this king's opponent. You have already been severely injured by this king. What right do you have to make this king admit defeat and surrender? The one who should surrender is you. If you don't want to die under this king's blade, surrender obediently." Ji Tianxing continued to deal with him and said with a mocking sneer, "Stop putting on airs with this king. Who should surrender you and I both know in our hearts. After my companions kill all the guards and shut down the 6 divine formations, it will be your time of death. White Phoenix, on account of your cultivation not being easy, this king will give you a chance to live. It's not too late to surrender now." Towards a high-level divine king like Bai Feng, Ji Tianxing was still somewhat moved. If he could subdue him and turn him into a puppet or bodyguard like Yank, his power would double. Furthermore, Bai Feng was backed by the Phoenix clan. Ji Tianxing was confident that he could infiltrate the Phoenix clan through Bai Feng in the future and take over the Phoenix clan. Now that he was already a divine king, he began to make preparations for his revenge. In the entire divine realm, the 5 overlords were all his mortal enemies. How could he complete his revenge alone? Therefore, he had been cultivating his forces since a long time ago to prepare for the future. From the looks of it, the ancient clans of the various grotto heavens were undoubtedly the best choice. It was also because of this that he agreed to accompany Jiang Tianyi to the Jiang clan as a guest. "Brat, you're too naive. Do you think that a high god king is so easy to deal with? It's just that I haven't been serious all this time." Bai Feng stared at Ji Tianxing, his eyes cold as he said in a solemn tone, "It's still not clear who will emerge victorious." When his voice fell, Bai Feng's body lit up with white light, and he disappeared in a flash. He had finally made up his mind to change his strategy. If he continued to tangle with Ji Tianxing, he would only suffer a crushing defeat. Moreover, he did not have much hope of killing Ji Tianxing. Since that was the case, he might as well settle for the next best thing. He did not have extravagant hopes of killing Ji Tianxing. As long as he trapped Ji Tianxing and the rest in Flowing Creek Pass, Bai Feng would have completed his mission. If he could delay for half a month, he would be able to wait for at least 2 divine envoys, several region lords, and more than 10 God King experts. In that case, Bai Feng would not have to risk his life and would still be able to make a great contribution. This was considered the safest method. Therefore, Bai Feng retreated outside the divine formation and stood in the sky above Flowing Creek Pass, looking down at Ji Tianxing, who was inside the divine formation. Ji Tianxing frowned and raised his head to look at Bai Feng in the night sky. Although the two of them were only 100,000 feet apart, there were 6 divine formations between the two of them. Although the divine formation's power was greatly reduced, they still remained intact and had not been broken. Bai Feng's eyes were focused on the 6 layers of array formation light barrier. His hands formed a divine seal, constantly striking out dazzling divine patterns to control the divine formations. Swoosh, swoosh. Very quickly, the 4 divine formations that were not controlled by anyone shone with dazzling divine light once more, erupting with powerful divine power fluctuations. Under Bai Feng's control, the 4 divine formations were operating at full power, releasing invisible nomological power that fiercely suppressed Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi and the rest. The situation inside Flowing Creek Pass instantly changed. Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, Yun Yao, and the rest were all suppressed by the 6 divine formations, their combat strength weakened by 20% to 40%. However, no one could stop their attack. The 40,000 garrison troops and 70-odd high-ranking divine lords who were lucky enough to survive originally still wanted to put up a stubborn resistance. But when they saw that Fire Mulberry Emperor was dead, Qin Yi and Wu Shui were killed, and the heavenly smelting divine craftsman was also dead. Now even Domain Lord Bai Feng had escaped from the divine formations and stood in the sky above Flowing Creek Pass. They were truly a group of dragons without a leader and were in complete despair. It's over. We've lost completely. 3 divine king powerhouses have been killed, and even His Excellency the Domain Lord has escaped from Flowing Creek Pass. We're dead for sure. We're all selling our lives for His Excellency the Domain Lord. How can he abandon us and flee alone? We were too stupid to be treated as cannon fodder by His Excellency the Domain Lord. All along, we thought that His Excellency the Domain Lord was unparalleled in the world, valiant and invincible. I didn't expect that when he really encountered a few foreign race divine kings, His Excellency the Domain Lord fled in defeat. What a joke. Countless soldiers and dozens of high-ranking divine lords all had heavy hearts and despair, their expressions sorrowful. Everyone understood that they had been abandoned by Bai Feng. Immediately, most of the soldiers and high-ranking divine lords lost their fighting spirit and no longer controlled the divine formations. Deafening discussions erupted in the crowd, roars of despair, unwillingness and grief and indignation. Many high-ranking divine lords brought large batches of defending troops and retreated, fleeing out of Flowing Creek Pass. But they were blocked by layer after layer of divine formations, unable to escape at all. Finally, someone erupted in despair. A high-ranking divine lord looked up at the night sky and roared angrily at Bai Feng. Domain Lord Bai Feng, all of us respect and worship you, that's why we bathed in blood and fought bravely for you, advancing dauntlessly wave after wave. But this is how you treat us. Aren't you afraid that this matter will spread out and make the Fire Mulberry region's billions of citizens bitterly disappointed? Furthermore, you abandoned us and allowed us to be slaughtered to the last. What benefits does it have to you? After we're all dead, what's the use of you being the only one left? Can you kill these few foreign race divine kings? I'm afraid that you'd still have to flee in defeat, right? Since that's the case, why can't you have some backbone and fight a bloody battle with everyone to the end? This high-ranking divine lord shouted out the inner voice of several tens of thousands of defending troops. Countless people chimed in loudly, questioning why Divine King White Phoenix did this. Immediately, the entire Flowing Creek Pass seethed with excitement. Chapter 3456. The crowd was agitated. The 40,000 defending troops and dozens of high-ranking divine lords were not in the mood to fight. They joined forces to denounce Domain Lord White Phoenix. Speaking of which, it was also strange. If the leader of the soldiers was Emperor Huasong, perhaps they would not be so indignant. At least, Emperor Huasong would say some high-sounding words to boost morale and encourage the soldiers to continue holding on. But Domain Lord White Phoenix was good. He was always high and mighty, sacred and dignified. He did not even make a sound when he fled, afraid that the soldiers would find out and lose face as a Domain Lord. Most importantly, he was too high and mighty. It was basically the first time the 40,000 soldiers present saw him. Their reverence for him was very vague. Instead, their reverence for Emperor Huasong was very clear and deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. As such, when everyone was abandoned by White Phoenix and was about to face death, that was why they were so indignant and agitated. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi and the rest all revealed stunned looks. They looked at the defending troops that were collectively fleeing, then looked at White Phoenix in the night sky, revealing mocking smiles. White Phoenix, oh White Phoenix, how did you become a Domain Lord? The people under your command all rebelled. A dignified domain lord, in order to drag out an ignoble existence, actually fled alone without a word. In order to stall for time, you actually sacrificed several tens of thousands of soldiers as cannon fodder. Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi's cold laughter spread throughout the entire flowing Chuan Pass. The 40,000 soldiers' emotions became even more agitated, shouting for White Phoenix to open the divine formation and let them out. Divine King White Phoenix was unable to restrain his anger. He was so angry that his face turned black. Surging killing intent flames surged out from his entire body. He glared at Ji Tianxing and the rest and shouted coldly, "Don't be smug. Even without those 40,000 soldiers, this king can also trap you all." Finished talking, he looked at the 40,000 soldiers inside flowing Chuan Pass again and said in a dignified tone, "Soldiers, your bravery, fearlessness and loyalty, this king has seen it all. To be able to have such loyal and brave soldiers like you is this king's honor and pride." But everyone saw that the enemy's strength was too strong, and also too sinister and cunning. If this king fights a bloody battle with you to the end, not only will you die here, this king may also lose his life. But this king is shouldering the heavy responsibility entrusted to me by the divine envoy, and I cannot fail to live up to the trust of His Majesty the God Emperor. In order to complete the mission and seal the enemy here, this king can only do this. This prince believes that the soldiers are all people with a strong sense of righteousness. In order to protect the Fire Mulberry region, and for the glory of His Majesty the God Emperor, you will understand this king, right? Divine King White Phoenix's words immediately calmed the anger of many people. Many divine lords and soldiers revealed thoughtful expressions. Some of them even nodded in agreement. After all, Bai Feng had spoken the truth with a sincere tone. He was also very humble. This was a very smart move. If he still put on an arrogant attitude at this time, the 40,000 soldiers would definitely not work for him. However, just as the soldiers were wavering and hesitating, Jiang Tianyi said, "That's right. The divine King White Phoenix that all of you respect and worship only has this bit of strength. He misjudged our strength and rejoiced in grandiose achievements. That's why he set up an ambush at Flowing River Pass, hoping to catch all of us in one fell swoop. In the end, he caused the death of 3 divine kings under him, and even sent 160,000 soldiers to their deaths. But he doesn't care about the lives of ants like you. Anyway, there are tens of billions of people in the Fire Mulberry region, and the death of 100,000 is nothing. Furthermore, he is more afraid of death than any of you. After all, he is the region lord and has enjoyed all the glory and wealth. How can he die here with ants like you? It's fine if he escapes alone. He only needs to say a few words to obtain your forgiveness, and make you willingly send yourselves to your deaths. When all of you are dead, he will turn and run. Anyway, all of you won't be able to see." The rumbling voice spread throughout Flowing River Pass, allowing the 40,000 soldiers to hear it clearly. Immediately, many of the wavering and hesitant soldiers revealed indignant looks. Jiang Tianyi exposed White Phoenix's thoughts. Many of the soldiers and divine lords started to cause a ruckus again. White Phoenix was so angry that his eyes were about to split open. He wished that he could tear Jiang Tianyi into pieces. He cursed with a voice like muffled thunder, "Jiang Tianyi, you despicable and shameless bastard, don't slander me." "Ha ha." Jiang Tianyi looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. He asked back, "What? Your true colors were exposed by this king and you became angry from embarrassment? Do you think that your little bit of thoughts can be hidden from the 40,000 soldiers? Do you dare to swear to the heavens that you have never thought of this before?" This king. White Phoenix subconsciously wanted to raise his hand and swear. But his hand was raised halfway and he forcibly retracted it. What a joke. Swearing to the heavens, this sort of thing, it was best not to do it so easily. Otherwise the oath would really come true. Even if White Phoenix was a high divine king, he also had to maintain reverence towards the heavens. After all, the stronger one was, the more reverence one would have towards the heavenly Tao. Seeing White Phoenix stuck, Jiang Tianyi laughed coldly and mockingly. He pointed at him and shouted to the 40,000 soldiers, "Do you see that? White Phoenix is ashamed and does not dare to swear at all. You are all abandoned pawns, cannon fodder that is helping him to buy time." ***. White Phoenix was so angry that he cursed loudly. He did not care about his demeanor as a region leader at all. He roared angrily, "Jiang Tianyi, this king is going to turn you into ashes." As he roared, White Phoenix used his arts to control the 6 divine formations and released sharp blades of divine light that covered the sky. They swept towards Jiang Tianyi. Jiang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu and Yank were all affected, and they hurriedly used their arts to defend themselves. At this moment Ji Tianxing, who had been silent all this time, suddenly smiled playfully. Lan Er and Yun Yao noticed his expression and were confused. They wanted to ask him what was wrong. However, before the two of them could speak, a deafening roar erupted from the 40,000 soldiers. At least 3,000 soldiers were agitated and cursed angrily. White Phoenix, you are a region leader who is respected by millions of people, but you are a coward who is afraid of death. Your life is precious, but are our lives worthless? We have 200,000 soldiers working for you, but in your eyes, we are only worthy of being cannon fodder? Brothers, we can't be fooled by him anymore. He wants to live, but we don't want to die either. Everyone, let's work together to break these formations and escape from Flowing River Pass. What *T mission? What loyalty? We just want to live. All sorts of curses and roars erupted from the crowd, echoing in the night sky. The 3,000 soldiers were scattered all over the crowd. As they roared and shouted, they waved their swords and sabers and attacked the divine formations in front of them. The other 30,000 soldiers were already hesitant and tormented in their hearts. Hearing the shouts and roars of the crowd, their emotions were immediately affected. Many people also broke the divine formations and tried to escape. The situation instantly became chaotic. Chapter 34:57. In the blink of an eye, the 40,000 guards were in chaos. At least half of the guards were incited, shouting things like, "I want to live," and attacking the divine formation with all their might. The other 20,000 guards and dozens of high-level divine lords watched the chaos unfold with their own eyes, but they were full of hesitation. Many people did not stop their companions, but they also did not dare to participate easily. But even more people, incited and led by their companions, also joined the ranks of those attacking the divine formation. Seeing this scene, Jiang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu, Yank, Yun Yao and Lan Er were all stunned. Everyone's expressions were strange and they exclaimed in astonishment, "What's going on? Why are these guards acting like they're on steroids?" Bai Feng, who was above Flowing River Pass, was also filled with astonishment, so angry that his entire body trembled. "Bastards! You damned bastards, how can you do something like betray me at the last minute? You don't deserve to be Fire Mulberry Region's citizens. I'm ashamed of you." Bai Feng never thought that it would be fine if the guards did not help to defend the divine formation, but they actually turned around and attacked the divine formation he had set up. This was simply too ridiculous. However, no matter how much he roared and shouted, it was of no use. The guards who had fallen into madness did not listen to his orders at all. Furthermore, Bai Feng would not be able to kill those defenders. Not only could he not intimidate the guards, but he would also completely enrage them, causing all the guards to rise up and resist. For a moment, Bai Feng was in a dilemma and was also at his wits' end. The only thing he could do was desperately maintain the divine formation's operation and block the guards' attacks. Inside Flowing River Pass, Jiang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu, and the others gradually came to their senses and sensed that something was wrong. Everyone looked at Ji Tianxing, revealing inquiring gazes. "Young Master Tianxing, this should have something to do with you, right? No matter how cowardly those guards are, they shouldn't be so agitated. Young Master, did you do something? Although I also think that Young Master did it, those people still look quite normal. Young Master can't possibly turn them into puppets in such a short period of time, right?" Faced with everyone's questions, Ji Tianxing simply nodded with a smile and admitted it. "That's right, I did it." Everyone exclaimed in shock and disbelief. "Oh my God. Sure enough, it was Young Master's doing. Young Master, how did you do that?" The way I see it, the 3,000 plus defenders were the first to change sides before the others were influenced and incited. "Young Master, did you do something to those 3,000 people? To be able to refine more than 3,000 people into puppets in such a short period of time, Young Master, you're going against the heavens." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and explained, "I'm not refining it into a puppet. No matter how heaven-defying I am, I don't have that ability. However, your guesses are correct. However, what I used wasn't a puppet technique. Instead, it was a divine ability that affected one's soul and will. Previously, I had been observing the defenders and picked out over 3,000 of them who were the most agitated and the most cowardly. Then I used the soul control divine art to trigger the fear and anger in their hearts, making them lose control of their emotions and affect their wills. Naturally, they switched sides at the last minute. The others were also dissatisfied, but they were still hesitating. When they saw their companions fighting back, they naturally joined the counterattack camp. Humans are social animals. Of course, they have a herd mentality. After hearing Ji Tianxing's explanation, everyone was enlightened. Instantly, their faces were filled with admiration and admiration. That's too ingenious. Young Master's grasp of people's hearts and the use of divine abilities is simply superb. Sometimes the one who defeats the enemy may not be the enemy. It may be our own people, Young Master, this is called using the least effort to achieve the greatest effect and defeat the strongest opponent. Bai Feng's lungs are about to explode from anger. His face is as black as charcoal. This is simply ridiculous. Everyone was in a good mood. They were full of praise for Ji Tianxing's methods. At this moment, Yun Yao reminded everyone, although those defenders changed sides at the last minute, they can help us break the divine array. However, we can't let our guard down. Take this opportunity to break the array as soon as possible. Don't let Bai Feng delay any longer. Judging from his thoughts and intentions, he is trying to stall for time and wait for reinforcements. Everyone understood this point. Without hesitation, they waved their divine weapons and began to attack the divine array. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Everyone released thousands of rays of divine light that shot towards the innermost circle of the divine array like a rain of arrows. Following the loud rumbling sounds, several cracks appeared on the divine light shield within a radius of 10,000 miles, and it began to shake violently. Unfortunately, the divine array was not broken. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing hurriedly said, "Everyone, don't worry. Let me find the flaw in the divine array first. Then we can attack together. Only then can we break it in one blow." Chao Qingyu, Yank, Yun Yao and Lon are happily agreed. However, Jiang Tianyi frowned and mumbled worriedly, "Young Master Tianxing, isn't this too slow? By the time you find the flaw in the divine array, Bai Feng will have already strengthened the divine array." Ji Tianxing turned a deaf ear to his words. He was using his God's Eye mystic technique to observe the divine array. However, just as Jiang Tianyi finished speaking, he found a weak point. Although it was not a weak point in the divine array, it was just a weak point. However, it was enough for Ji Tianxing. "Look carefully. It's right there," Ji Tianxing shouted. He waved his sword and sent out a ray of golden sword light. It pierced towards the 5-colored light barrier 1,000 miles away. Chao Qingyu, Yank, Yun Yao and the others did not hesitate to use their divine powers. They followed the golden sword light and attacked the weak point of the divine array. "Oh my God. So fast." Jiang Tianyi was shocked. He looked incredulous. He knew very well that Bai Feng was not an expert in the art of array formations. The divine arrays she set up were all mid-grade king grade. Fortunately, they were not high-grade king grade. Otherwise, they would have been defeated long ago. However, even a mid-grade king grade divine array would take a long time to break. He did not expect Ji Tianxing to find the flaw so quickly. Bam! In the next moment, Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu and the others' attacks hit the 5-colored light barrier with a loud bang. Boom! The 5-colored light barrier, which looked like a heavenly canopy, was immediately blasted open. A crater with a radius of 1,000 feet was formed. Dense cracks extended all around. The 5-colored light barrier was so close to being pierced through. It turned out that Ji Tianxing had found the right thing. Chao Qingyu, Yank and the others were not excited. It was as if they were used to it. Jiang Tianyi's heart was beating wildly. He was so excited that his mouth was dry. At this moment, Ji Tianxing shouted, "Everyone, let's work together again. We will definitely be able to break the array." Jiang Tianyi did not dare to be in a daze anymore. He quickly drew his divine bow and shot out 4 meteor arrows. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Everyone unleashed their destructive divine power, streaking across the night sky like meteors as they attacked the crater in unison. Boom! Along with an enormous explosion that shook the heavens, the 300 deep pit was penetrated on the spot, and it transformed into a large hole that sprayed out fragments of divine light that covered the sky. Chapter 3458. Just like that, the innermost ring's first mediocre king-level divine array was destroyed. Around the hole, which had a radius of 1,000 feet, were densely packed cracks. Cracking sounds could be heard. The appearance of this hole gave the 40,000 soldiers hope of escaping. Without needing anyone to give the order, dozens of Sir Gods and 40,000 soldiers attacked at the same time. They unleashed their most violent divine skills and blasted them toward the hole. They had no choice. It was just a hole. It was not enough to destroy the entire divine array. If all 40,000 soldiers were to rush over at once, Bai Feng would fill in the hole before they could even escape from the divine array. Therefore the soldiers cooperated and attacked together. They wanted to expand the hole further. Boom. Crack. In the next instant, an overwhelming number of attacks converged into a 5-colored torrent that slammed into the hole viciously. As expected, with a deafening explosion, the hole instantly expanded by 10 times. It became a gap with a radius of 1,000 feet. The cracks around the gap also became denser and spread faster. Kacha. The cracks spread rapidly and soon collapsed. The gap also expanded again. It extended to a radius of 100,000 feet. This time the damage to the divine array was too great. Even if Bai Feng tried her best to repair it, it would not be repaired in a short time. This is great. The divine array is destroyed. We can finally escape. What are you waiting for? Run. Territorial Lord Bai Feng wanted to trap us here as cannon fodder, but the enemy helped us break the divine array. How ironic. What territorial lord? What enemy? They are just divine kings who do not care about the lives of others for their own benefit. They are not good people. Don't waste time. If we don't escape, the territorial lord will repair the divine array. The 40,000 soldiers and dozens of Sir Gods cheered excitedly. They surged toward the gap like a tide. Swoosh. In a short time, more than 40,000 people passed through the gap and escaped the first divine array. However, what blocked them was the second divine array. The 5-colored light screen that covered the sky was only a few dozen miles away. The 40,000 soldiers immediately calmed down. They regained their despair and helplessness. Even though Ji Tianxing and the others had broken the first divine formation and helped them escape, they were still unable to escape. However, there were still a second, third, and fourth divine formations in front of them. A total of 5 divine formations. Don't be discouraged, everyone. Let's work together and aim at the same point. If we attack together, we might be able to break the formation. At this critical moment, a relatively clear-headed High God Lord loudly suggested. This suggestion received everyone's approval. Under the lead of that divine monarch, everyone simultaneously cast spells to attack a certain spot on the multicolored light barrier. However, they didn't understand king-grade divine formations at all. They just randomly found a target and attacked it. Naturally, it was useless. The torrent of divine light that filled the sky had collapsed, but the 5-colored light barrier was still intact. Fortunately, at this moment, Ji Tianxing had already used his God's Eye secret technique to observe for 30 breaths of time. He found another weak point in the 5-colored light shield. Look carefully. Attack this place with me. Ji Tianxing shouted in a low voice. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed out a sword light with all his strength. Swish. The 1,000-foot sacred sword slashed at a certain spot on the 5-colored light barrier with an earth-shattering power. Chao Qingyu, Yang Yunyao and the others had already been waiting for Ji Tianxing to attack. Seeing him slash out a sword light, everyone also waved their weapons and attacked the weak point of the divine formation with all their might. Jiang Tianyi was no exception. He pulled his divine bow and shot out the most powerful meteor arrows. Of course, he was even more shocked and his face was full of disbelief. Oh God! Grandpa isn't just a top divine blacksmith, he's also a top array master. He was only able to find the weak point of the first divine formation because he had observed it in advance. However, he only observed the second divine formation for 30 breaths and found the weak point. This is terrifying. Just as Jiang Tianyi's heart was filled with shock, an earth-shattering explosion erupted. Boom! A 1,000-foot hole appeared on the second 5-colored light barrier and countless divine light shards splashed out. The 40,000 soldiers and dozens of divine lords had attacked twice before, but to no avail. When they saw that Ji Tianxing and the others had joined forces to attack and break the second divine formation, they instantly cheered excitedly. They had a tacit understanding and immediately unleashed their divine abilities with all their might. They unleashed a torrent of divine light that blotted out the sky and blasted towards the hole in the light barrier. Boom! Another earth-shattering explosion erupted, resounding through the clouds. Without a doubt, the divine formation, which was already broken, instantly expanded to a radius of 10,000 feet. Countless cracks also appeared on it. The 40,000 soldiers and the many high divine lords hurriedly passed through the massive gap and escaped from the second divine formation. Then they learned their lesson. They stopped attacking the divine formation together and waited patiently for Zhi Tianxing and the others to destroy the divine formation so that they could finish the job. Seeing this, Divine King White Phoenix, who was in the night sky, exploded in anger, her face turning green. How could this be? This is too preposterous. 40,000 warriors are all under my command. They should be loyal to me and fight against those alien god kings with their lives. Why did they join forces with those foreign divine kings to attack the divine formation I set up? This result was indeed preposterous and inconceivable. Just a moment ago, Zhi Tianxing's group and the 40,000 defenders were like fire and water, killing each other. Now they had stopped fighting and joined forces to destroy the divine formation. Divine King Baifeng had become their common enemy. But such a bizarre and laughable thing had really happened. How could Baifeng not be enraged? She watched as Zhi Tianxing and the 40,000 soldiers destroyed two divine formations and began to attack the third divine formation. Baifeng could not take it anymore. Her body burned with flames of anger as she glared at the 40,000 soldiers and roared, "You cowardly bastards who betray your masters for glory. Worms. Ants. You are the shame of the Fire Mulberry region. You are wicked beyond redemption and will be nailed to the pillar of shame after death. According to the laws of the Fire Mulberry region, you deserve to die. I will clean up the place now and make you pay for your evil deeds." It was clear that Baifeng was flustered and exasperated, and she wanted to kill all 40,000 soldiers. Zhi Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi and the others were not surprised by his reaction at all. Of course they did not have any reaction. They did not sympathize with the 40,000 soldiers, nor did they gloat. After all, the 40,000 soldiers were Baifeng's people. If she wanted to clean up the place, it was her freedom and right. However, Baifeng's actions were too disappointing. Yun Yao and Laner could not help but shake their heads and sigh with complicated expressions. She really views human lives as worthless. Those 40,000 divine spirits would never have thought that the one who killed them would be the region lord they respected and worshipped the most. Sword breaking the nine heavens, sword breaking the nine heavens. Chapter 34:59. Boom. Crack. Following an earth-shattering explosion, the third divine formation was destroyed by Zhi Tianxing's group and the 40,000 defenders. However, the 40,000 defenders charged through the gap without any regard for their own safety, only to be met with an incomparably tragic massacre. Baifeng, who was furious to the point of going berserk, controlled the fourth divine formation and released the most violent killing move. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Hundreds of millions of saber lights, sword lights, and spear shadows flew out from the five-colored light barrier, as well as towering divine flames, ice blades and frost swords. All kinds of divine technique attacks poured down like a torrential flood, drowning the 40,000 defenders. Ah! Bam! 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 Kacha kacha! Heart-wrenching screams, anguished roars and the muffled sounds of divine techniques colliding erupted one after another. The entire flowing river pass was in chaos, completely becoming a world of divine light torrents. How could those 40,000 celestial gods possibly withstand the onslaught of a king-grade divine formation? In less than 10 breaths of time, 80% of the soldiers were slaughtered. All of them were torn to shreds by the divine light and turned to ashes. The few thousand defenders who were lucky enough to survive, as well as the dozens of high-ranked divine lords, also suffered considerable injuries, their bodies bathed in blood. They struggled desperately, frantically fleeing, but could not escape the fate of certain death no matter what. In extreme despair, thousands of people looked up at the sky and started to curse and roar at Baifeng. Baifeng, you will die a horrible death. We are your people, loyal and devoted to you, but I didn't expect that we would be killed by you. You evil demon who disregards human life. You are worse than pigs and dogs. You are not worthy of being the region lord, and you are even less worthy of being revered by billions of people. Even if we are all killed by you and turned to ashes, your vicious and despicable deeds will still be carried out. Eventually, the entire Fire Mulberry region will be known by your despicable and vicious ways. Baifeng. Even if we go to the netherworld and become ghosts, we will never let you off. I curse you. I curse you to be torn apart by lightning, burned to ashes, and never to be reincarnated. Countless heart-wrenching, furious, hopeless and helpless cries sounded within Flowing River Pass. Bai Feng became even more enraged. Her eyes were as red as blood and flames danced around her body. He pursed his lips and didn't say a word. He worked even harder to control the god formation to speed up the slaughter of the several thousand defenders. As for Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi and the others, as they circulated their energy to block the divine light that filled the sky, they did not forget to observe the weakness of the fourth divine formation. A short 40 breaths passed. The few thousand remaining defenders and the dozens of high divine lords had all died tragically under the slaughter of the divine formation. Everyone was smashed to pieces, turning into a rain of blood and meat paste that filled the sky, scattering in the ruins. The devastated Flowing Creek Pass finally quieted down. Next, it became a battle between Ji Tianxing and the others and Bai Feng. Even though Bai Feng would have to fight on her own without the help of 40,000 soldiers and dozens of godly sovereigns. However, the 40,000 garrison troops and divine lords were not his aid. Instead, they became his hindrance. Now that he had gotten rid of the guards and divine monarchs, he could use all his strength to control the divine array and trap Ji Tianxing and company. It was also at this moment that Ji Tianxing found the weak point of the fourth divine array. Swish! He waved the sword of burial of heaven and slashed out a giant sword that was 10,000 feet long, attacking the weak point of the divine array. Jiang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu, Yank and the others already had a tacit understanding with him. They hurriedly attacked the weak point with him. Kaboom! There was a deafening explosion as a hole that was 1,000 feet wide was blasted open in the five-colored light barrier. Debris flew everywhere. Ji Tianxing and the others transformed into streams of light and quickly passed through the hole, escaping the fourth divine array. There were only 2 five-colored light curtains left in front of them. As long as they could destroy the remaining 2 divine arrays, they would be able to escape Flowing Creek Pass. Seeing this scene, Bai Feng's eyes turned serious and her expression turned ugly. I spent 7 days with the help of a few hundred godly sovereigns and 200,000 soldiers, before I could set up 12 divine arrays. Although they were only mediocre king-level divine arrays, they were enough to give mid-level godly kings a headache. That white-robed brat was actually able to identify the weakness of each divine array within a few breaths. What kind of monster is he? Could he not only be a divine blacksmith who is proficient in refining weapons, but also a top-notch array master? Facing most godly kings, Bai Feng was confident and proud. For example, Jiang Tianyi. Even if it was a 6th-stage realm mid-level godly king, he did not think much of him. Ji Tianxing was the only one who made Bai Feng feel an unprecedented pressure. Not only was this fellow's battle prowess outstanding, being able to fight to a draw with him, he was also proficient in refining weapons and arrays. He wanted to use the 12 divine arrays in Flowing Creek Pass to trap Ji Tianxing and the others here. He was afraid that it would not work. Based on the speed at which he is breaking the arrays, in another 100 breaths, they will be able to escape Flowing Creek Pass. Even if I still have 6 divine arrays as my trump cards, it will not be able to withstand him breaking them. I cannot let him continue breaking the arrays. I have to think of a way to stop him. Bai Feng was anxious, but she could maintain her calm and composure. He used all his strength to cast the art and controlled the 5th divine array. It revolved rapidly and frenziedly attacked Ji Tianxing and the others. Hundreds of millions of divine light blades poured down like a torrential rain, drowning everyone's figures. All kinds of sword gleams and divine light shadows formed a torrent of torrents and hurricanes as they violently attacked. Yun Yao and Lon Er's situation instantly became precarious. Even Chao Qingyu and Yank could only defend with all their might. They did not dare to be careless. Only Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi could deal with it easily and were not injured. However, Ji Tianxing was worried about Yun Yao's safety. He could only protect her with all his strength and help her block the attacks of the divine arrays. Jiang Tianyi could only disperse some of his strength to help Lon Er block the attacks. In this way, everyone was safe and could hold on for a long time. However, Ji Tianxing could not observe the divine arrays seriously. It was difficult to find the weak points of the divine arrays. When Bai Feng saw that his actions were effective, he used all his strength to activate the divine arrays and released his strongest killing move. Instantly, Ji Tianxing and the others were in an even more dangerous situation. The pressure also increased. Bai Feng realized that Ji Tianxing was especially concerned about Yun Yao and was doing his best to protect her. Thus, Bai Feng changed his attack strategy slightly and focused on attacking Yun Yao. He looked like he was going to tear her into pieces. Yun Yao was surrounded by danger and could die at any time. Ji Tianxing was also under a lot of pressure. He did not have the time to search for the divine array's weak points. Bai Feng had achieved his goal. He was secretly delighted and couldn't help but sneer. Those 40,000 traders are indeed my stumbling blocks. Without them causing trouble, I can actually trap these people. According to the current situation, I can last for at least half a month. I hope there won't be any more changes. Within half a month, Xianxia and the other zone lords will definitely arrive. Previously, Bai Feng was still very desperate and helpless. Now he saw hope of success again. He was very confident and expectant. However, Bai Feng could not be happy for long. After a short 100 breaths of time, the situation on the battlefield changed. Chapter 3460. Jiang Tianyi, Chao Qingyu and the others could not even take care of themselves. Yun Yao could not protect herself. She had to rely on Ji Tianxing to protect her. She also knew that Ji Tianxing had no time to find the weakness of the divine array in order to protect her. If this continued, it would only drag on endlessly. This was very disadvantageous to them. Therefore, she took the initiative to suggest to Ji Tianxing, "Tianxing, don't worry about me. I will return to the divine pagoda to recuperate now. If you can't break the divine array, we will all be trapped here." Ji Tianxing and she had a telepathic connection. The two of them did not need to say much about the reasons and the stakes. They both knew very well. Therefore, Ji Tianxing did not hesitate or dissuade her. He readily nodded and agreed. Zhoosh. With a flash of divine light, Yun Yao entered the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda and returned to the distorted spacetime. He was out of danger. Ji Tianxing also heaved a sigh of relief. The pressure on him was greatly reduced. He continued to cast spells to block the divine array's attack. He also took the opportunity to use his God's Eye mystic technique to observe the 5th divine array. Although this divine array was operating at an extremely fast speed, Bai Feng was also constantly adjusting it and using all kinds of methods to cover up the divine array's weakness. However, Ji Tianxing's array formation skills and experience far exceeded Bai Feng's imagination. No matter how intricate and complicated the divine array was, it would become clear in his eyes. He quickly analyzed the veins and nodes of the divine formation by following the vines to get to the melon, extracting the silk from the cocoon. Then he selected the weakest and most vulnerable points from the tens of millions of nodes of the array. This process sounded simple, but it actually required a lot of deduction and calculation. Only a monster like Ji Tianxing would be able to analyze the results in such a short period of time, and with such accuracy. Time passed quickly. Soon 15 minutes passed. Finally, Ji Tianxing found a weak point in the 5-colored light screen that covered the sky and the sun. Found it. Everyone attack with me. Ji Tianxing was energized and shouted in a sonorous voice. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and unleashed 100% of his power. He stabbed out a dazzling giant sword. Shwa! The gigantic sword broke through all the blade lights and sword shadows in the sky and crashed into the 5-colored light screen with a deafening boom. However, everyone was exhausted from resisting the divine formation's attacks. It was very difficult for them to attack together with him. Only Jiang Tianyi, who was relatively strong, was able to draw his bow and shoot 3 shooting star arrows at that weak spot. Unfortunately, his and Ji Tianxing's attacks were unable to break through the light curtain, leaving only a crack. Ji Tianxing was not discouraged. With a determined look on his face, he shouted, "Again! Jiang Tianyi, let's attack at the same time." Jiang Tianyi naturally obeyed. When he slashed out with his full strength, he drew his bow and shot out 4 meteor arrows without any regard for his own safety. That giant sword shone with golden light and contained an extremely powerful and mysterious power. This was a completely new kind of power that Jiang Tianyi had never come into contact with before. He felt that it was extremely powerful and unfamiliar. This was because Ji Tianxing had used the power of the 5 elements to execute the world slash. Kaboom! Amidst a loud boom, the world slash and the meteor arrows hit the 5-colored light screen at the same time. The light screen, which was as thick as a wall, was instantly blasted a few 100 feet wide hole in it. Thousands of pieces flew everywhere. After the successful attack, Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi hurriedly covered everyone, passing through the sky full of saber lights and sword shadows, rushing out of the gap. Shua. In the blink of an eye, everyone had escaped from the fifth divine formation and arrived at the edge of the flowing river pass. There was only one light screen left in front of them. Jiang Tianyi was excited. He said happily, "There is only one divine formation left. Let's work together to break this divine formation. Then we can surround Bai Feng and kill that old bastard." Chao Qingyu, Yang and Lan Er were filled with relief and anticipation. They were clearly much more relaxed. However, Ji Tianxing was still expressionless. He frowned and observed the divine formation's light screen. His eyes were focused and cautious. At the same time, Bai Feng gave up on the fifth divine formation and controlled the sixth divine formation to attack again. The divine formation's light screen, which was thousands of miles wide, released all kinds of divine abilities and killer moves toward Ji Tianxing and the others. As he controlled the divine formation to attack, he thought to himself that method just now worked. His speed of breaking the divine formation slowed down significantly. It even took him close to 15 minutes. However, if this continues, even if I still have 6 divine formations as my trump card, I can only delay them for 2 hours. The power of one divine formation is not enough. I have to activate the other divine formations in advance. After making up his mind, Bai Feng used one hand to control the 6th divine formation. His other hand used a divine ability to activate the 3 hidden divine formations. Shua, shua. A moment later, 3 more light screens lit up in the night sky outside the flowing river pass. One light screen was formed by divine lightning. It flashed with billions of lightning arcs and looked very violent. The other screen of light was condensed from blood flames, and the annihilation divine flames that could incinerate the heavens and obliterate the earth rose with terrifying might. The third light screen was rainbow-colored. It was formed by more than 120 types of laws and divine powers. It was unpredictable. Under Bai Feng's control, the 3 divine formations sped up and released all kinds of divine abilities and killer moves toward Ji Tianxing and the others. Boom. Bam. 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 Swish. 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 Damn it. He still has a trump card. He set up more than 6 divine formations in the flowing river pass. Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi felt the pressure increase. They could only defend with all their might to ensure their safety. Chao Qingyu, Yang and Lan Er were in a precarious situation. They could lose their lives at any time. Especially Lan Er. She was quickly hit by the sword and saber lights. Dozens of wounds were left on her body. Seeing this, Chao Qingyu's heart ached. He was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. He did not care about his own safety and tried his best to save Lan. In the end, he was also attacked by the endless lightning and divine light. Soon he was covered in blood and wounds. Both husband and wife were seriously injured. Their combat strength decreased sharply. If they still couldn't escape from flowing river pass, both of them would be smashed into pieces and die in the divine formation. Seeing this, Yang also looked angry. He raised his head and cursed Bai Feng. His defense was very strong and he could still hold on for the time being. However, it was impossible for him to save Chao Qingyu and his wife. It was already very impressive that he could protect himself. Helpless, Ji Tianxing could only let Chao Qingyu and his wife return to the Green Jade Divine Warship to recuperate. The Green Jade Divine Warship shrunk to the size of a sesame seed and was stored in his body. Thus, only Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi and Yang were left in the divine formation. As the number of people decreased, their situation became more and more dangerous. Jiang Tianyi and Yang were anxious. They looked at Ji Tianxing and placed their hopes on him. "Young Master Tianxing, we can't go on like this. We can only hold on for a few more days. Our divine power will weaken. My lord, please think of something." Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a moment. Then he said in a low voice, "Hold on a little longer. I have an idea." Chapter 3461. Upon hearing Ji Tianxing's words, Jiang Tianyi and Yang's eyes lit up with hope. "Master, have you thought of a way?" Yanku was filled with anticipation as he asked subconsciously. But Ji Tianxing didn't answer. In a flash of white light he disappeared. He was nowhere to be found in the entire flowing river pass. Only his divine soul was present. Jiang Tianyi and Yang both realized that Ji Tianxing hadn't turned invisible. He had truly disappeared. But even though he had disappeared from the divine array, his aura remained in the divine array. Jiang Tianyi and Yang were both surprised and incredulous by this bizarre occurrence. In fact, Ji Tianqing had used the ultimate skill of the infinite sky of chaos. He had become one with the heavens and earth. He didn't exist, but he was everywhere. In this way, the hundreds of thousands of abhijnas released by the 4 abhijnas and the billions of saber lights and sword shadows couldn't do anything to him. Not only had he disappeared, but he was also invincible. Unless Bai Feng destroyed the entire flowing river pass in one move and reduced everything within 10,000 miles to nothingness. Otherwise, Ji Tianqing's life wouldn't be in danger. At this moment, Bai Feng was still in shock. He could sense Ji Tianqing's aura, but he couldn't find any trace of Ji Tianqing. That despicable little bastard. He actually disappeared. What kind of trick is this? Where did he hide? Bai Feng controlled the divine array to attack Jiang Tianyi and Yang while searching for Ji Tianqing. Unfortunately, 15 minutes had passed, but he still couldn't find Ji Tianqing. During this time, Ji Tianqing focused on observing the divine array and wasn't disturbed. He finally found the 6th divine array's weak point. Then he reappeared in the divine array next to Jiang Tianyi. Jiang Tianyi, attack with me. Ji Tianqing shouted solemnly. He waved the sword of burial of heaven and used his ultimate sword Dao skill, slashing out a 30,000-foot-long divine sword. Heaven-splitting sword. Jiang Tianyi also went all out, shooting 6 starlight arrows. Whoosh. Swish. The sky-splitting sword and the 6 shooting stars streaked across the night sky in an extremely dazzling manner. They passed through the countless saber lights and sword shadows and struck the weak point of the divine formation. Boom. There was no doubt about the result. A huge hole was blasted in the 5-colored light screen, and dense cracks extended from it. Taking advantage of the shaking of the divine formation, Ji Tianqing took Jiang Tianyi and Yang through the gap and escaped from Flowing River Pass. The 3 of them had left the ruined Flowing Chuan Pass. However, there were still 3 layers of divine array light screens in front of them. Looking at the 3 light screens, Yang gnashed his teeth and cursed, "White Phoenix, you old dog, you're really despicable and shameless. How many more divine formations have you set up? Take them all out." Jiang Tianyi maintained his calm and said in a low voice, "Even if Bai Feng is a high-level god king, it would be very difficult for her to set up more than a dozen medium-grade king-grade divine formations in just a few days. Therefore she should only be left with these 3 divine formations." Ji Tianqing frowned and shook his head. Logically speaking, Bai Feng would need 2 to 3 months to set up 9 medium-grade king-grade divine formations. However, he has the help of a few hundred god monarchs and 200,000 soldiers. He doesn't lack the divine stones and materials needed to set up the formations. Within half a month he would probably be able to set up more than a dozen divine formations. Ah! Yang was stunned and a little dumbfounded. Jiang Tianyi frowned and asked with an ugly expression, "You mean that Bai Feng has other trump cards besides these 3 divine formations? What should we do? These divine formations are endless. When can we escape?" Ji Tianqing said expressionlessly, "It's fine. I'll break through as many divine formations as he sets up. After all, the speed at which he sets up the formations is nothing compared to the speed at which I break them. Within a few hours we'll definitely be able to escape the seal." With his words, Jiang Tianyi and Yang felt as though they had eaten pills of reassurance. They also felt more confident. After that, the 2 of them continued to defend against the 3 divine formations with all their might. Ji Tianqing used the same trick again and used the limitless sky of turbidity to disappear into the divine formations and focus on observing the divine formations. Bai Feng was as helpless as ever. He couldn't stop Ji Tianqing from disappearing, nor could he find out where Ji Tianqing's real body was. After all, this was the 2nd time Ji Tianqing had used the limitless sky of turbidity in front of him. He wasn't a monstrous genius like Ji Tianqing. How could he see through it so quickly? With nowhere to vent his anger, Bai Feng became even more aggressive and attacked Jiang Tianyi and Yang even more ferociously. Jiang Tianyi was fine. He was quite strong and had a medium-grade king-grade divine artifact protecting him. He was temporarily safe. Yang, on the other hand, was in big trouble. The super-strong defense of the rock tribe was no longer of any use. Soon he was covered in wounds and bloodstains from the attacks of the 3 divine arrays. However, he was stubborn. He gritted his teeth and persevered. He didn't even cry out in pain because he was afraid that Ji Tianqing would be distracted. Moreover, he didn't enter the divine tower to heal. Jiang Tianyi tried to persuade him, but he shook his head and refused. He explained, "These superficial wounds are nothing to the rock race. Everyone has retreated to heal. There are only the three of us left. I can't back down and let you and the Lord fight alone." Jiang Tianyi looked at him in surprise and gave him a thumbs up when he heard his deep but determined voice. Soon half an hour passed. Ji Tianxing was quite injured and had used up a lot of his divine power. His observation of the divine formations had slowed down. In addition, this lightning divine formation was obviously more complicated than the previous 6 divine formations. Therefore, Ji Tianxing spent twice as much time to find the weak point of the divine formation. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. He joined forces with Jiang Tianyi to attack the weak point of the divine formation. If they couldn't break it the first time, they attacked a second time, a third time, a fourth time. Finally, after 7 consecutive attacks, the 2 of them broke the 7th divine formation. The 3 of them passed through the 100-foot wide gap and escaped the seal of the divine formation. They continued to attack the 8th divine formation. Compared to the previous divine formation, this one was more complicated and more complete. Ji Tianxing used the same trick again and had to spend more time to find the weak point of this divine formation. Just like that, time continued to pass. Another hour later, the 3 of them broke through the 8th divine formation and continued to face the 9th divine formation. Ji Tianxing's speed of breaking the divine formation was getting slower and slower. However, compared to all the god kings, this was still a heaven-defying speed. Bai Feng's expression darkened. His heart clenched and he was extremely anxious. In order to slow down Ji Tianxing's speed, he had to activate the last 3 divine formations in advance. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Another 3 screens of light lit up, covering a radius of more than 10,000 miles. As Bai Feng controlled the divine array to unleash devastating attacks, she thought to herself, "It's no wonder that Celestial Aspect Emissary was defeated by him. This brat is truly a monstrous genius. This king is really unlucky. Why did I meet such a perverted guy? I've used up all my trump cards. In 4 hours at most, this king will have to run for his life." Book Guest Residence Reading Website. Chapter 3462. However, Bai Feng had already predicted the outcome. No one in the entire Fire Mulberry region could help him. Only Stellar Aspect Ambassador and the other region lords were qualified to help and save him. But those Divine King powerhouses needed around 8 days at the fastest before they could reach the Flowing Creek Pass. No matter what, Bai Feng would not be able to hold on until then. Stellar Aspect Ambassador, I have already tried my best. Bai Feng looked up at the night sky in the north and sighed silently in his heart. Soon another 2 hours passed. Ji Tianxing had also broken through the 9th divine array, creating a 1,000-foot wide gap. Ji Tianxing led Jiang Tianyi and Yang through the gap and continued to attack the 10th divine array. The last 3 divine arrays were each more complicated than the last, and their defensive power was also stronger. Ji Tianxing and the other 2's power continued to weaken, causing the time needed to break through the divine arrays to become longer and longer. In the process of breaking through the divine arrays, Ji Tianxing had considered using the spatial transference divine ability to teleport thousands of miles away. That way he would not need to break through the divine arrays to escape the seals of the dozen or so divine arrays. However, this idea was not realistic. The 12 king-grade divine arrays that Bai Feng had set up all had the ability to seal space. Therefore, Ji Tianxing could only proceed step by step and break the divine formations one by one. Time passed very slowly. To Bai Feng, every minute and every second was especially torturous. 3 hours later, the 10th divine array was broken through, and the pressure on Ji Tianxing and the other 2 was greatly reduced. 6 hours later, the 11th divine array was broken through as well. There was only 1 divine array left in front of Ji Tianxing and the other 2. The pressure on them decreased once again and their expressions were clearly much more relaxed. However, Bai Feng's expression was as cold as ice, and his eyes were filled with disappointment and unwillingness. In the end, we have failed miserably and are powerless to reverse the situation. He sighed in his heart as he tried his best to control the divine array to kill Ji Tianxing and the other 2. However, defeat was inevitable. No matter how hard he tried, he could not change the outcome. 2 hours later, this divine array was also cracked by Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi. Even though both of them were panting from exhaustion, their divine powers were weak, and their auras were unstable and chaotic. However, if they attacked 100 more times, they would be able to break through the five-colored light screen and rush out of this divine formation. At this moment, Bai Feng had completely given up all hope. He stopped controlling the divine formation and gave up on struggling. He said to Ji Tianxing, "Tianxing, I have to admit that I have underestimated you. With your talent, strength, and methods, you'll definitely be unrivaled in the world in the future and become a well-known figure among divine kings. But in the end, you are only a god king. You will never be able to escape the rule of His Majesty the God Emperor." As early as 1,000 years ago, the world had already changed. In the present boundless heaven continent, the God Emperor reigned supreme. No one could go against his will. The power of the God Emperor realm is not something you can imagine. Even if you can kill this king, Oracle Xianxia, and even more domain lords and divine envoys. But so what? In the end, you will die under the siege of so many god kings. In fact, His Majesty the God Emperor only needs one palm to easily crush all of you. At this moment, Bai Feng's anger had already subsided. His emotions were calm and steady. The words he said were also sincere and came from the bottom of his heart. Among them, there was a faint trace of helplessness. After pausing for a moment, he continued, 8,000 years ago, it was indeed the various great paradises that controlled the continent and looked down on the common people. But that is already history. Whether it is you or me, we can no longer immerse ourselves in the glory of the past. The world has already changed. If you want to live on peacefully, you can only give up on unrealistic delusions. This king has said all that I have to say. Take care of yourselves. With that, Divine King Bai Feng sighed and turned to fly away. Swoosh! He transformed into a scarlet flame and rapidly disappeared into the horizon, escaping without a trace. Inside the divine formation, Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi were still attacking the divine formation together. Yang ignored his miserable injuries and pointed in the direction that Bai Feng escaped. He cursed angrily, "That old bastard, how could he be so cowardly?" When he saw that we were about to break through the last formation, he knew that his life was in danger and actually fled in advance. Jiang Tianyi said in a neutral tone, "Actually, we are all heavily injured and weak. If Bai Feng fought a bloody battle with us, he might not lose. But he was too cautious and would rather give up a little hope than take the risk." Ji Tianxing recalled Bai Feng's words and revealed a thoughtful expression. He said, "An old and cunning fellow like him naturally has his own way of survival. Being greedy and advancing rashly is not a good thing. Only by being cautious can one live long. Moreover, Bai Feng has no enmity with us. He was just following orders. He has already sacrificed 3 god kings, hundreds of elites, and an army of 200,000. There is no need for him to throw himself in as well." Jiang Tianyi and Yang nodded in agreement. After a moment of silence, Yang asked, "Master, what did he mean by those words he said before he fled?" Ji Tianxing frowned. "He probably misunderstood our intentions and felt the same way. That's why he said those words. Speaking of which, this person is actually not annoying. In fact, there is a possibility that we will cross paths again." "Cross paths again?" Yang revealed a confused expression. He asked in confusion, "Master, could it be that you want to chase him to his nest and kill him?" Before Ji Tianxing could reply, Jiang Tianyi smiled gently and said, "It's not what you think. Young Master Tianxing's words of crossing paths might be friendly." Yang still did not understand. He simply scratched his head and did not say anything else. Jiang Tianyi continued, "Actually, I am the same as Bai Feng. We are both disciples of the ancient clans. I can empathize with what he said. 1,000 years ago, the ancient clans were the true rulers of the continent and enjoyed unparalleled glory and resources. However, the Shura God Emperor appeared and swept through the various paradises, unifying the 100 territories. The glorious era that belonged to the ancient clans has passed. We should not be immersed in our memories. We must adjust and adapt to the new situation. Only then can we continue to reproduce and survive." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, "Perhaps Bai Feng thought that the Jiang clan and I are working together to fight against the Shura God Emperor. That's why he warned us." Jiang Tianyi was stunned. He said with an awkward expression, "That should be the case." After a pause, he asked worriedly, "Young Master Tianxing, will Bai Feng report this to the God emissaries and the Shura God Emperor? If the Shura God Emperor thinks that the Jiang clan has thoughts of betrayal, won't the Jiang clan be in danger?" Ji Tianxing waved his hand and comforted him. "Bai Feng probably won't do that. Didn't the various ancient clans secretly form an alliance? If the Shura God Emperor finds a reason to attack the divine attraction Grotto Heaven, the other paradises will also be in danger. Everyone should understand the principle of being intimately connected. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 3463. Originally, Jiang Tianyi was filled with worry. But after listening to Ji Tianxing's advice, he felt much more at ease. The two continued to attack. After more than 20 attacks, they finally broke through the divine array's light barrier. Boom. Crack. There was a loud explosion as a 1,000-foot-wide gap appeared. Outside the gap was the cold night sky where the mountain wind whistled. There were no more obstacles. Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi revealed gratified expressions. Yang was even more excited and couldn't help but cheer. Great. We finally broke through the 12 divine arrays and are about to leave this damned place. The three quickly passed through the gap and left Flowing River Pass. Being in the night sky, the three felt much more relaxed and unrestrained. Jiang Tianyi took out his palace and cast a spell to turn it into a divine ship. The three entered the palace. Jiang Tianyi steered the palace south while recuperating from his injuries. Ji Tianxing and Yang both entered a secret room to recuperate. Yang's injuries were the most severe. Even with the help of divine pills and miraculous medicines, he still needed more than a decade to recover. Thus, Ji Tianxing let him enter the distorted spacetime to recuperate under the blood flame sacred tree. Ji Tianxing also entered the distorted spacetime to recuperate before cultivating. After all, he had gained a lot from this battle at Flowing River Pass. Qin Yi Wuxia and the sky-smelting divine craftsman had all fallen. Their interspatial rings and divine spark fragments had all fallen into his hands. After recuperating from his injuries, he would count the spoils of war and refine the divine spark fragments of the three divine kings. In the next 2 days, the divine ship formed by the palace passed through the Fire Mulberry Empire without any obstructions. At the same time, slanting Phoenix Mountain in the center of the Fire Mulberry domain. Amidst the white sea of clouds inside a dazzling palace. Bai Feng sat alone in her study, looking out the window at the setting sun. Her expression was somewhat lonely and weathered. Her 2 deputies were dead and the sky-smelting divine craftsman was also killed. She was the only divine king left in the entire Fire Mulberry domain, and a large number of elite experts had died. The Fire Mulberry domain could be considered to have declined. It would be difficult for it to recover to its peak without a few hundred or 1,000 years. Bai Feng sighed and took out a communication jade slip to contact Celestial Aspect Divine Envoy. Stellar Aspect God Emissary, this king has gathered the elite forces of Fire Mulberry region and set up an ambush at Flowing River Pass. We have fought fiercely with those foreign race god kings for an entire night. Unfortunately, we failed. I was unable to capture them and only managed to delay them for 1 night. I am deeply sorry, but I have tried my best. I hope you can understand. Bai Feng briefly reported the results of the battle, then waved her hand and sent out a communication jade slip. Swish. After the jade slip flew away, he sat in the study and waited silently. About a quarter of an hour later, a beam of spiritual light flew down from the sky and landed in front of Bai Feng. This was Celestial Aspect's reply. Bai Feng picked up the communication jade slip and read the message inside with her divine sense. The dignified voice of the Stellar Aspect God Messenger sounded in his mind. Brother Bai, please restrain your grief. In this battle of Flowing Rivers Pass, Brother Bai's loyalty to His Highness the God Emperor can be witnessed by the sun and the moon. In the future, this envoy will definitely personally report to the God Emperor. In addition, the strength of those foreign race god kings cannot be underestimated. It is already commendable that Brother Bai was able to delay them for 1 night. Thank you for your help, Brother Bai. This envoy will remember this favor. Of course, Brother Bai, please be patient. Those foreign race god kings will not be able to jump around for long. This envoy will definitely exterminate them. In this envoy's hunting plan, this is only the beginning. They should be heading south, passing through the Fire Mulberry domain and entering the Red Dragon domain. This envoy and 2 other divine envoys as well as 17 domain lords are rushing over at full speed and gathering from all directions. We will meet in the south of the Red Dragon domain and should be able to complete the encirclement there. At that time, no matter how capable those foreign race god kings are, they will not be able to escape from the palms of this envoy. After reading the message in the jade slip, Bai Feng silently put down the communication jade slip and fell into a state of hesitation. From the tone of the stellar aspect God Messenger, this matter should not have been reported to the God Emperor. After all, several domain lords and god kings were killed consecutively. This only proves that he is not capable enough. He must want to ask the other two divine envoys for help to kill Xianxia and the others as soon as possible. This is the only way to atone for his crimes. Their encirclement will converge in the Red Dragon domain. Although the stellar aspect God Messenger did not ask me to help, he did not ask me to rest and recuperate. Should I go or not? Bai Feng frowned, silently weighing the pros and cons. In order to kill Xianxia and the others, the stellar aspect God Messenger is making such a big fuss. More than 20 domain lords are rushing over to help. I am so close to the Red Dragon domain. If I don't go, I will be criticized. Forget it, I will go to the Red Dragon domain to join in the fun. Bai Feng made up his mind regarding this matter. However, there was still one thing that he was hesitating about. Xianxia and the others met Jiang Tianyi of the Jiang clan at the Fire Dragon Mountain and traveled together. I don't know what their relationship is and what the Jiang clan is trying to do. Should I tell the stellar aspect God Messenger about this news? Bai Feng's fingers tapped on the table. After pondering for a long time, he still could not make up his mind. 20 days passed in the blink of an eye. Tianyi Palace passed through the Fire Mulberry domain and entered the Red Dragon domain. Before entering the Red Dragon domain, Jiang Tianyi was especially cautious when crossing the border. They had been ambushed at the Flowing Chuan Pass at the border of the Fire Mulberry domain. He was too embarrassed to make the same mistake again. However, it was strange this time. The border of the Red Dragon domain was calm and everything was as usual. Not only were there no traps or ambushes, but there was also nothing out of the ordinary. It was as if the Red Dragon domain lord did not know they were coming. This abnormality made Jiang Tianyi more vigilant. He muttered to himself. Sir Xianxia offended the stellar aspect God Messenger. That guy mobilized many domain lords and divine kings to kill us with great fanfare. The Red Dragon domain lord did not set up an ambush at the border. Does he want us to lower our guard? Then he will set up an ambush somewhere in the Red Dragon domain. He wants to catch us off guard and catch us off guard? Jiang Tianyi silently guessed and moved even more cautiously. At this moment, in the distorted spacetime of the Jutian Tenju Pagoda, Ji Tianxia and Yang had been in seclusion for nearly 3 years. Yang's injuries had mostly healed and were close to recovery. Ji Tianxia's injuries had long since healed. He had also counted the spoils of war and was refining the godhead fragments of the 3 divine kings. The space rings of the 3 divine kings had stored a huge amount of cultivation resources. Roughly estimating the value of those cultivation resources was close to 300 billion god stones. Logically speaking, this was a huge fortune. Unfortunately, most of the cultivation resources were of a lower grade. 90% of them were monarch high-grade and supreme-grade items. There were less monarch low-grade divine weapons, divine abilities, cultivation methods, elixirs, talismans and materials. Ji Tianxia picked out all the monarch-level divine pills, divine abilities, cultivation methods, equipment and materials. He kept a few divine pills and materials for his own use. The rest were given to Ji Ku White Dragon and Wu Shuang. He stuffed all the remaining cultivation resources, including all the god stones, into the heaven-mending orb for the 5 elements world to absorb. 200 billion god stones worth of cultivation resources was not too shocking to him. However, to the 5 elements world, it was a terrifying force that could stimulate the growth of the entire world. Chapter 3464. 200 billion god stones could expand the 5 elements world by at least 10%. With the expansion of the 5 elements world, Ji Tianxia's power would increase as well. Moreover, Ji Tianxia had refined the 3 supreme beings' godhead fragments and his power would increase tremendously. Even the blood flame sacred tree, which had absorbed 200,000 soldiers, many Sir Gods and 3 supreme beings during the Battle of Flowing River Pass, had increased tremendously. Now it had grown another 1,000 feet and its leaves were luxuriant. The divine power aura and crimson flame that it released were also stronger. Judging by the grade of king-level divine weapons, it was now at the peak of lower king level. Perhaps in the near future, it would devour more experts' blood souls and it might evolve into middle king level. When Ji Tianxia was refining the godhead fragments, a thought flashed across his mind. He remembered that Lin Shui had mentioned something to him previously. She had asked if there was any chance for Xuehuan's power to increase again. Sir God Xuehuan was severely injured back then and lost his divine body. Ji Tianxing had used the branch of the blood flame sacred tree to refine Xuehuan's body, allowing Xuehuan to become a high-level Sir God. Now the blood flame sacred tree had evolved to king level. Ji Tianxing couldn't help but wonder if he would succeed if he took another branch of the blood flame sacred tree to replace Sir God Xuehuan's divine body. If he succeeded, wouldn't Sir God Xuehuan possess a king-level divine body? As long as he worked hard, he would be able to break through and become a real supreme being one day. However, if he didn't succeed, not only would Xuehuan lose his divine body, he might even lose his life. Thinking of this, Ji Tianxing decided to reconsider. 1.5 years passed very quickly. The 3 supreme beings' Godhead fragments were refined by Ji Tianxing. His power had reached the peak of 2nd Heaven God King, and he was only 1 step away from 3rd Heaven God King. At the same time, he refined another 20 types of God Dao laws to increase his power. Now he had mastered 420 types of laws. In terms of the number of laws, he had more than 10 types than Bai Feng, who was in 7th Heaven God King realm. If Bai Feng knew this secret, her eyeballs would probably fall to the ground. What the hell? Divine King Tianxing, who was able to fight him to a draw, was only in the 2nd layer of the Divine King realm? The number of divine Dao laws grasped was actually even more than his. After finishing his cultivation, Ji Tianxing got up and stretched. He circled around the blood flame sacred tree to check on everyone's condition. Yun Yao's injuries had already recovered, and she was cultivating in seclusion. The great battle at Flowing River Pass previously enriched her actual combat experience and also let her see the disparity between herself and Divine King powerhouses. She worked even harder in her cultivation and improved her strength bit by bit. Unfortunately, after careful observation, Ji Tianxing discovered that she basically showed no signs of breaking through to the Divine King realm. It seemed like he could only place his hopes on the 7th Divine Pearl. On the other hand, Ji Ke's situation was a little out of Ji Tianxing's expectations. The time she broke through to the 9th level Divine Lord realm was a little later than Yun Yao. However, she had already reached peak Divine Lord realm and was beginning to break through to the Divine King realm. Although it was difficult to break through to the Divine King realm, it was like crossing a natural chasm. But she had already started to try, and she summarized her experience from her failures, continuously strengthening her foundation. Ji Tianxing could tell that her foundation was already very robust, and she had very high hopes of breaking through to the Divine King realm. At most 1 to 200 years, at least 3 to 5 years, she should be able to succeed. Apart from that, White Dragon, Ji Wushuang, Zhen Hong, Black Dragon, and Qin Yu were all high-ranked divine lords. Everyone was cultivating bitterly with all their might, looking like they would not give up until they broke through to the Divine King realm. But Ji Tianxing was clear in his heart that not all hard work could be exchanged for rewards. Not everyone would definitely break through to the Divine King realm if they followed him. Some results were actually predestined long ago. Of course, if a massive fortuitous opportunity appeared, perhaps the outcome would change. Ji Tianxing circled around the sacred tree and prepared to leave the distorted spacetime to check on Jiang Tianyi's situation. But right at this time, the Burial of Heaven's voice sounded out in his mind. I have 2 pieces of good news. Do you want to hear it? Ever since the Burial of Heaven became a mid-rank king-grade divine artifact, it had not spoken again. This was the first time it had taken the initiative to contact Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was stunned and hurriedly asked, "What good news?" Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes has become a god. The Burial of Heaven's tone was calm and emotionless. Ji Tianxing frowned and was a little dazed. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes? Which Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes? The Burial of Heaven was probably a little speechless. After a moment of silence, it explained, "It's the old man you subdued in the profound sky continent. Later, you refined him into an ancient tree, and he has been in the sword world ever since." So it's him. Ji Tianxing was enlightened and recalled. He chuckled and said, "It's been too long, I've forgotten about him." The Burial of Heaven continued to explain, "All these years, it has been rooted in the sword world, desperately absorbing heaven and earth's spirit chi and resources, steadily increasing its strength. Originally, it was limited by the body of an ancient tree and could not become a god. But not long ago I recovered to mid-rank king grade, and the sword world also expanded 100 times. The world changed greatly, divine power was abundant, and resources increased dramatically. Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes was the first to break through the shackles and become a true god. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said with a chuckle, "Interesting. This old man is tenacious. Even after becoming an ancient tree, he refused to give up hope of becoming a god. Now that he has become a true god, he can break free from the shackles and take human form again, moving freely." He thought for a moment and said, "How about this? Throw Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes into the 5 Elements world and let him protect my father and guide his cultivation." The Burial of Heaven said calmly, "He is indeed a suitable candidate. The 5 Elements world has transformed and its shackles have been released. Billions of living beings have the hope of becoming a god. Your father's aptitude is not too high and he is still in the tribulation realm. With the protection and guidance of Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes, he will definitely be able to safely pass the 9 tribulations and become a martial saint." Ji Tianxing said with a smile, "I have refined the 5 Elements world and placed it in the heaven-mending pearl. Even if those living beings become gods, they will not be able to ascend to the god realm." The Burial of Heaven agreed, "This is also the reason why Old Ancestor 3 Absolutes is so anxious. That is why I am informing you. Of course, the 5 Elements world is not weaker than the god realm, so there is no need to ascend." Ji Tianxing stopped discussing this matter and asked, "What is the second good news?" The Burial of Heaven said calmly, "The Gold Mountain King has also become a god." The Gold Mountain King? Ji Tianxing was startled. With his previous experience, he thought for a moment and guessed the answer. "The leader of the Earth Spirit clan in the Sword World, right?" "Yes." The Burial of Heaven replied and added, "The Earth Spirit clan has already multiplied to 100,000 people, and there is no lack of martial gods and martial saints among them." Ji Tianxing was quite surprised and found it hard to believe. "Those dwarves are quite fertile, huh? I haven't paid attention to them for many years and they have actually grown to this extent? It seems that the Earth Spirit clan is worth nurturing and they will be useful in the future." "Understood." The Burial of Heaven replied and fell into a long silence, no longer speaking. Chapter 3465. Even though Ji Tianxing was already a divine king, he would only look forward and set his sights on the higher realms of the divine path and formulate a long-term plan for revenge. He would not linger on the past, nor would he waste time in reminiscing. Wuhan had not been found and the 5 god emperors were still high above, ruling the divine realm. His blood feud had not been avenged and the world was not at peace. But he also knew that after reaching the divine king realm, the progress of one's strength would definitely slow down. Ordinary divine king experts might only be able to break through one realm after several thousand or 10,000 years. Even a monstrous genius like him would have to spend dozens to hundreds of years before he could gradually increase his cultivation base. During this process he would pay attention to the 5 Elements world and the Sword world. When the time was right, he would secretly help and nurture the living beings of these 2 worlds. To him, the living beings of the 5 Elements world and the Sword world were the foundation of his people, the foundation of his future forces. It might be difficult for them to achieve anything in the next 1,000 years. But thousands of years, 10,000 years later? Perhaps by then, the Earth Spirit clan of the 5 Elements world and the Sword world would have a large number of divine lords and a small number of divine kings. That would be his people and forces. Creak, creak, creak. The stone door of the secret room opened. Ji Tianxing walked out of the secret room and came to the main hall of Tianyi Palace. Jiang Tianyi was sitting cross-legged in the main hall, silently healing himself while driving the palace south. He had to drive the palace and could not heal himself in seclusion. In this state of healing, his injuries recovered very slowly and he had only recovered 70%. But he loved cleanliness, and his tattered white crane cloak had long been replaced with a new one, and his messy white hair was neatly combed. "Tianyi, where are we now?" Ji Tianxing walked in front of him and asked. Jiang Tianyi opened his eyes and greeted him, replying, "Young Master Tianxing, we just entered the Red Dragon domain not long ago." Ji Tianxing nodded and asked, "When crossing the border between the 2 domains, did you encounter any ambushes?" Jiang Tianyi shook his head and said with a serious expression, "Ever since the battle at Flowing River Pass, we have not encountered any ambushes. The Red Dragon domain has not reacted at all. But the more it is like this, the more I feel strange and uneasy." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and analyzed, "Ever since the Azura God Emperor unified the entire boundless heaven continent, it has been peaceful for 1,000 years. Those divine envoys and domain lords were all arrogant. Now that something like this had happened, they would definitely not let the matter rest, nor would they try to keep the peace. Especially Stellar Aspect Emissary, he will definitely gather many domain lords and deity kings to kill me. It was just that the news of the defeat at Flowing River Pass had just spread out. They definitely had to act cautiously. In fact, they might even reformulate their plans and not be in a hurry to act. But the next time they make a move, it will definitely be a thunderous strike. That makes sense. Jiang Tianyi nodded in agreement and said in a low voice, 10 days ago, I sent a message to the Divine Attraction Paradise and asked the Jiang clan's spies to help me gather information. At the same time, I also sent a message to a friend in Shemi Paradise, asking her to help me investigate the situation in the surrounding regions. I reckon it won't be long before they get back to me. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, Shemi Paradise is best at gathering information and has eyes and ears all over the world. But the people of Shemi Paradise don't care about family and only care about money and benefits. You actually have friends? Jiang Tianyi was stunned for a moment. For some reason his face turned red and his gaze was a little evasive. Looking at his posture, Ji Tianxing vaguely understood something. Jiang Tianyi was a little embarrassed and hurriedly changed the topic, asking, Young Master Tianxing, may I ask, how did you become enemies with Stellar Aspect Emissary? Ji Tianxing replied casually, At the beginning, I only became enemies with 2 domain lords. Those 2 domain lords suffered losses and went to Stellar Aspect Emissary for support. In the end, I killed one of the 2 domain lords and the other went missing. Stellar Aspect Emissary was also heavily injured by me. From then on, Stellar Aspect Emissary gathered many deity kings and domain lords to besiege me. I see. Jiang Tianyi nodded and said with some indignation, Those divine emissaries are very arrogant and domineering. They consider themselves the guards of the God Emperor and don't put anyone in their eyes. In the past, there were a few divine emissaries who went to Divine Attraction Paradise and all of them were very arrogant and arrogant. Anyone who offended them would be charged with the crime of disobeying the God Emperor and rebelling against the God Emperor. But in reality, many divine emissaries are even inferior to those domain lords. In the eyes of us ancient clan disciples, those divine emissaries are the lackeys of the God Emperor, and the most arrogant and despicable ones. Seeing Jiang Tianyi's reaction, Ji Tianxing couldn't help but ask, You must know that I killed a domain lord and offended a divine emissary. Aren't you worried? Worried about what? Jiang Tianyi asked subconsciously. Ji Tianxing said, About getting into trouble. Teet. Jiang Tianyi didn't think much of it and said with a smile, What's there to be afraid of? You only killed a few domain lords and offended a divine emissary, not the Azura God Emperor. Our divine attraction paradise has been passed down for tens of thousands of years. Why would we be afraid of a mere divine emissary? The two chatted for a while and Ji Tianxing told him to treat his injuries well. Jiang Tianyi said that he was fine and that his injuries had mostly healed. At this time, a stream of light suddenly flew down from the sky and landed in front of Jiang Tianyi. Jiang Tianyi's face lit up with joy and he reached out to pick up the communication jade slip, saying, They must have found out. As he spoke, he used his divine sense to read the information in the jade slip. However, after reading the information in the jade slip, his expression became a little strange. Ji Tianxing asked, What's wrong? What happened? Jiang Tianyi explained, It wasn't them who replied. It was ninth brother who asked me for help. 2 years ago, the clan sent me and 3 other brothers to the secular world to gain experience and recruit refining geniuses for the clan to replenish new blood. Ninth brother Jiang Tianxing is my half-brother from a different mother. We lived close to each other while the other 2 brothers went far away. One was in the south and the other was in the east. Jiang Tianxing stayed in the Hengshan region for half a year and spent a lot of effort to find 2 refining geniuses. He wanted to recruit them back to the Jiang clan. He didn't expect the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect's second senior brother Qinlan to also be in the Hengshan region. After Qinlan heard the news, he rushed to intercept Jiang Tianxing and snatched the 2 refining geniuses. Hearing this, Ji Tianxing frowned. 100 Refinement Ancient Sect? Second disciple Qinlan? Jiang Tianyi raised his head and looked at him, asking, Young Master Tianxing, you know about the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect? You know Qinlan? Ji Tianxing nodded and said, As for the 100 Refinements Ancient Sect, you mentioned it before. Just like the Jiang clan, the Nangong clan and the Raging Flame Grotto, it's an ancient clan that's proficient in crafting weapons. However, to be honest, the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect's knowledge of refining is slightly better than the other clans. Chapter 3466. Jiang Tianyi's expression was a little gloomy. Young Master Tianxing, although I admit that you are speaking the truth, I am not convinced. Cough cough. Ji Tianxing coughed to cover up his embarrassment and comforted him. It's fine. It is normal for the big clans to rise and fall. It is only a matter of time before the Jiang clan surpasses the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. Jiang Tianyi felt a little better and continued. The 100 Refinement Ancient Sect has always been arrogant and has old grudges with the Jiang clan. They have always been fighting openly and secretly. However, ninth brother recruited 2 blacksmithing geniuses first. What right did Qinlan have to snatch them? Ninth brother and Qinlan had an argument and started fighting. In the end, ninth brother suffered a loss, but Qinlan did not let it go and insisted on snatching the 2 blacksmithing geniuses. How preposterous. This is too much. Speaking of this matter, Jiang Tianyi was filled with indignation and anger. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked, "Then what do you plan to do? Go to the Hengshan region to help your ninth brother?" Jiang Tianyi frowned and said in a low voice, "Ninth brother and I have a good relationship. He is in trouble, so I should help him. However, I want to bring you back to the Jiang clan, and now we are surrounded by so many god kings. The situation is so dangerous I cannot complicate things." Ji Tianxing continued, "However, if you don't help, not only will your ninth brother be bullied, but the 2 blacksmithing geniuses will also be snatched away." Jiang Tianyi hesitated for a moment before gritting his teeth and making a decision. "It's fine. Ninth brother rarely goes out and is inexperienced. I'll let him gain some experience with this matter. No matter how overboard Qinlan is, he won't dare to do anything to ninth brother. Otherwise, it will cause a war between the 2 clans. As for the 2 blacksmithing geniuses, it doesn't matter if they are snatched away. We can just find them in the future." Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "All right, you can make the decision." After speaking, he prepared to return to the secret room and continue cultivating in the God Pagoda. However, at this moment, another ray of light flew in from the sky and landed in front of Jiang Tianyi. The ray of light dispersed and a transmission jade slip appeared. Jiang Tianyi hurriedly took the jade slip and read the message inside. After a moment, his face became gloomy and serious. "Young Master Tianxing, the friend from Shimi Grotto Heaven has replied to my letter." Ji Tianxing also had a bad premonition when he saw his solemn expression and solemn tone. "What's the situation?" Jiang Tianyi said in a heavy tone. "My friend found out that the Red Dragon domain looks calm on the surface, but a huge storm is brewing. The domain lords of the surrounding domains seem to be rushing to the Red Dragon domain. Moreover, not only were there more than 10 area masters rushing over, it seemed like there were 2 divine envoys as well. They might meet up in the Red Dragon domain and give us a thunderous blow." Ji Tianxing nodded to show that he understood. He smiled and said, "Their target is not us but me." Jiang Tianyi was very smart and understood what he meant. He hurriedly said, "Young Master Tianxing, you are looking down on me. I'm not afraid of those divine envoys and region lords. I won't back down. I want to fight alongside you and bring you back to the divine attraction paradise." Ji Tianxing smiled again and said, "You must know that you represent the Jiang clan of the divine attraction paradise. You can't just say what you want. Moreover, your ninth brother is being bullied in the Hengshan region. You should go there to help him." Jiang Tianyi said firmly, "Young Master Tianxing, you are the benefactor of the Jiang clan. Now that you are in trouble, how can we just sit by and do nothing? As for going to the Hengshan region to help my ninth brother, I think it's a good idea. Let's go together." Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. Divine Envoy Xianxia must have gathered more than 10 area masters in the Red Dragon domain. He must have set up a trap. Since that's the case, there's no need for us to fight him head-on. Let's take a detour to the Hengshan region. If they continued to fly south, they would pass through the entire Red Dragon domain. It would take at least half a month. However, the Hengshan region was southwest of the Red Dragon domain. They could avoid Divine Envoy Xianxia's ambush by taking a detour. Originally, Jiang Tianyi didn't want to go to the Hengshan region to help Jiang Tianxing. Now that he knew about Divine Envoy Xianxia's scheme and Ji Tianxing's agreement, he changed direction and flew to the Hengshan region. 10 days later. Heaven Dragon Pass in the southern part of the Red Dragon Domain. It was located at the southern border of the Red Dragon Domain. 100,000 miles south would be out of the Red Dragon Domain. Heaven Dragon Pass was located in a towering mountain range. The mountains were steep and the cliffs were tens of thousands of feet high. Compared to the Manchuan Pass in the Fire Mulberry Domain, this pass was smaller but the terrain was more dangerous. Originally, this was the border between the two domains. It was an important pass and a place to fight for. However, the boundless Heaven continent had been peaceful for thousands of years. There were no wars between the domains. Normally, there were only 100,000 soldiers stationed at Heaven Dragon Pass. Moreover, the 100,000 soldiers were relatively free. They spent their days patrolling and cultivating. Until 10 days ago, the peace of Heaven Dragon Pass was broken. First, the area master of the Red Dragon Domain led several emperors and more than 200 Surgat experts to Heaven Dragon Pass. The 100,000 soldiers were ready for battle. They were ready to listen to the orders of the area master and the emperors. Then, the area master of the Red Dragon Domain and his deputy worked together to set up a divine array. The emperors, more than 200 Surgat experts and the 100,000 soldiers helped. In 10 days they set up 3 king-level divine arrays. Heaven Dragon Pass became impregnable. It was surrounded by divine arrays. Its lethality was terrifying. During this time, the area masters of other domains led a large number of Surgat experts and arrived at Heaven Dragon Pass. These area masters and Surgat experts did not rest after arriving at Heaven Dragon Pass. They also joined the ranks of setting up divine arrays. The entire Heaven Dragon Pass was filled with a tense and austere atmosphere. Everyone knew that an earth-shattering battle was about to arrive very soon. Just like the Manchuan Pass in the Fire Mulberry Domain. Until today, there were 17 area masters and more than 20 Surgat experts gathered in Heaven Dragon Pass. Tonight, a few more super noble god kings arrived at the Heaven Dragon Mountain Pass mysteriously and silently. The 100,000 soldiers were not qualified to know their identities. However, the 20 Surgat experts gathered in the Commander-in-Chief's palace saw their true faces. There were 4 of them. 3 of them were honorable divine envoys. Divine Envoy Xianxia was the leader. Divine Envoy Ku Yun and Divine Envoy Zhang Ying assisted. As for the 4th Surgat, it was the area master of the neighboring Fire Mulberry Domain, Surgat King Baifeng. All the Surgat experts present had heard of the battle at Manchuan Pass and Surgat King Baifeng's encounter. Everyone looked at Baifeng with eyes full of sympathy. Baifeng did not say anything. She stood silently among the many Surgat experts. She was not conspicuous. Divine Envoy Xianxia's injuries had not healed. However, it did not seem to affect him on the surface. His face was gloomy. His eyes were sharp. His entire body was filled with killing intent. His gaze swept across the many Surgat experts in the hall. He said in a deep voice, "The traitors led by Tianxing went all the way south and killed several area masters and Surgat experts. This is the first time such a thing has happened in 1,000 years. It is simply appalling. It is so cruel that it makes one's hair stand on end. I do not wish to speak any more nonsense. In short, we have gathered a large number of troops this time. 30 Surgat experts are overseeing. We must kill them at Heaven Dragon Pass. If we let them escape, everyone here will take their own lives to atone for their sins. Including me." Chapter 3467. There was dead silence in the hall. The air was heavy and oppressive. Everyone could clearly feel the determination of stellar aspect Divine Envoy. But they were not worried or afraid. Instead, they were full of confidence. Nonsense. 30 God King experts, close to 1,000 god monarchs and 100,000 soldiers. With such a grand lineup, not to mention dealing with a few foreign race god kings, even annihilating 2 god envoy teams would not be a problem. As long as those foreign race god kings passed through Heaven Dragon Pass, they would die without a doubt. This plan was set. Everyone only needed to wait patiently. However, it was because those foreign race god kings had not appeared and their whereabouts were unknown that stellar aspect was uneasy. He looked at the night sky outside the hall and muttered to himself with a dark expression. According to the speed of those traitors, they should be arriving at Heaven Dragon Pass soon. God Envoy Ku Yun and God Envoy Zhang Ying nodded in agreement. That's right. Next, everyone should enter a state of combat readiness and hide their auras as much as possible, waiting for those traitors to walk into the trap. With the lesson learned at Flowing River Pass, they will definitely be more cautious. So, we need to make some preparations and send a few scouts to search the vicinity. As long as those traders pass through Heaven Dragon Pass, they will die without a burial place. But the only uncertainty is whether they will pass through Heaven Dragon Pass or not. By the way, Stellar Aspect, didn't you say that this God King Bai Feng has extraordinary talent and can detect the traders' whereabouts? Why don't you let him check where those traders are now? How far are they from Heaven Dragon Pass? The gazes of the two God envoys landed on the crowd and gathered on Bai Feng. More than 20 God King experts also looked at him with burning eyes. Many of them had jealousy hidden in their eyes. After all, Bai Feng could attract the attention and high regard of the three God envoys. He would definitely have good fortune in the future. Stellar Aspect nodded slightly and looked at Bai Feng. He said, Bai Feng, you have the talent of God's eye. You can predict fortune and misfortune and deduce heavenly secrets. Moreover, you have met those traders and fought with them before. You are not unfamiliar with their situation. At this crucial moment, I will have to trouble you to cast a spell and deduce their whereabouts. Stellar Aspect's status was higher than Bai Feng's. But he was not as strong as Bai Feng and they were old friends. In front of so many God Kings, Stellar Aspect Divine Emissary was very polite to him. Bai Feng naturally did not dare to decline. He also knew that his biggest purpose in coming to Tianlong Mountain Pass was not to participate in the battle. Instead, he used his divine eyes of annihilation to help everyone search for Ji Tianxing and the others. This king will naturally obey Lord Stellar Aspect Envoy's orders. Bai Feng cupped his hands and bowed. He then walked out of the crowd and stood in the middle of the hall. The other God Kings retreated in a hurry. They stood at the edge of the hall and watched Bai Feng cast her technique quietly. Bai Feng took out 9 mysterious flags and planted them on the ground of the palace to form a simple divine formation. After that, he withdrew an ancient fiery copper geomantic compass and sat cross-legged on the ground. 3 divine envoys, please lend me a hand. Bai Feng made her request. The 3 divine envoys did not hesitate and quickly followed his instructions. They stood in different positions and cast spells to assist him. Next, Bai Feng focused on using a secret technique. She activated the Annihilation Divine Eye and deduced the location of the Palace of Heaven's Will. The hall was silent and time passed quietly. 4 hours quickly passed. Many of the God Kings were getting impatient. They secretly transmitted their voices to each other and questioned whether Bai Feng was reliable or not. Fortunately, Bai Feng's technique was nearing its end and he had finally deduced the result. The 9 mysterious flags all shone with a dazzling divine light. The fiery copper geomantic compass in his hand also released a 7-colored divine light. 10 streaks of divine light converged above his head, forming a screen of light that resembled a sea of stars. It was dazzling, vast and profound. A boundless and vast aura emanated from the screen of light. The 20-odd God Kings in the hall, including the 3 divine envoys, all wore solemn expressions. A hint of respect and wariness arose in their hearts. The God Kings who had secretly doubted Bai Feng all shut their mouths. They did not dare to doubt him anymore. As the saying went, once an expert made a move, the truth would be revealed. Among the 30 God Kings, Bai Feng was not the strongest. He could only be ranked in the top 5. However, his divine ability and consummate skill had shocked everyone. Soon, a hazy and blurry image appeared on the light screen that was as vast as the starry sky. A blurry divine ship streaked across the sky and sea of clouds like a bolt of lightning and landed in the middle of a towering mountain range. If one looked carefully, they would discover that there seemed to be an ancient city in the depths of the mountain range. However, the image stopped there and quickly dissipated. Whoosh! The screen of light dissipated. The 9 flags and the fiery copper geomantic compass fell silent and became dim. Bai Feng ended his technique and opened his eyes. The 20-odd God Kings stared at him. The 3 divine envoys could not wait to ask about the result. How was it? Did you find their whereabouts? Bai Feng, where are those traders now? Are they close to the Heaven Dragon Pass? Facing the 3 divine envoys' anxious gazes, Bai Feng's expression was a little strange. He pondered for a moment before putting away the 9 flags and the fiery copper geomantic compass. The divine eye of annihilation on his forehead also closed. Seeing his strange expression, divine envoy Xianxia asked even more anxiously, Bai Feng, what happened? Tell me. Bai Feng hesitated for a moment before saying in a low voice, "Lord Divine Envoys, those traitors are very far away from us. They are not in the Red Dragon domain." The three divine envoys' eyes widened when they heard this. The 20-odd god kings were also stunned and could not help but exclaim, "What? Not in the Red Dragon domain? Are you kidding me? Did we do all this for nothing?" "Bai Feng, you must be mistaken, right? I just said that he's definitely not reliable. Divining heavenly secrets and predicting good or bad luck. That's ridiculous. I can't believe you can say such ridiculous things." The originally silent hall exploded with discussions, exclamations, and doubts. Bai Feng became the target of public criticism and was criticized and denied by many god kings. Divine Envoy Xianxia's expression was gloomy. He waved his hand to signal for everyone to be quiet. He stared at Bai Feng with a dignified gaze and asked seriously, "Bai Feng, our spies clearly detected that those traitors passed through the Fire Mulberry domain and went south into the Red Dragon domain. Are you sure they are not in the Red Dragon domain now?" Others did not believe Bai Feng, but he did. Bai Feng nodded and said with certainty, "I'm very sure." "Then where are they?" Divine Envoy Xianxia asked. Bai Feng frowned and thought for a moment before replying, "In the southwest, in the Hengshan domain. It seems to be in the Hengshan Empire." The 20-odd god kings were still questioning and discussing Bai Feng, but Divine Envoy Xianxia suppressed them with a dignified manner. He discussed with Ku Yun and Zhang Ying for a moment and quickly made a decision. "Pick 15 god kings to stay at Heaven Dragon Pass and wait for orders. The other 11 god kings are to immediately rush to the Hengshan Empire. Bai Feng, come with us first and rush there as fast as you can." Chapter 3468. This was the decision made by the three divine messengers after a discussion. The 20 or so god kings present had no right to question him. They could only obey. Moreover, Bai Feng spoke with certainty. The many god kings found it hard to refute. Since the three divine envoys believed that it was true, then he would take it as true for the time being. Soon the three groups of people were selected and prepared. Of the 15 god kings, 6 of them were domain lords. All of them were left in the Heaven Dragon Pass, waiting for the next target. This was also in case Bai Feng's calculation was wrong. If Ji Tianxing and the others entered the Tianlong Pass, they would at least have enough power to eliminate them. The other 11 god kings were led by a higher god king as they drove their divine ships towards the Hengshan Empire. As for the three divine envoys and Bai Feng, they took the lead and left Tianlong Pass on a top king-grade divine artifact. That divine artifact was called the Void-Piercing Hairpin. It was said that it was a relic left behind by the mother of the Shadow Executioner divine envoy. It wasn't an offensive or defensive divine artifact. Instead, it was a flying divine artifact that could travel through space and travel through outer space. In the boundless universe, the sky-piercing hairpin could travel thousands of miles in an instant. Flying in the divine realm, one's speed would increase by several folds. Ordinary god kings would need half a month to reach Hengshan region's Hengshan Empire. As for the three divine envoys and Bai Feng, relying on the power of the space-piercing hairpin, they would only need about 5 days to arrive. The reason why the 4 of them went first was that the space inside the hairpin was limited and could not fit so many people. If he wanted to continuously teleport and travel through space, he would have to expend a huge amount of divine power. The 4 of them had to take turns to replenish the sky-piercing hairpin with divine power. Moreover, with each additional person, the consumption of divine power would multiply. If it wasn't for the fact that Bai Feng possessed the divine eyes of annihilation, he would still need to deduce the heavenly secrets to find Ji Tianxing and the others. With God Envoy Zhang Ying's personality, he probably wouldn't even want to bring him along. Hengshan region, Hengshan Empire. In the endless Chang'e mountain range, there was a majestic ancient city that had existed for 10,000 years. It was called Chang'e City. This city was located in a remote area, in a vast mountain range with a radius of a few million miles. Usually, the number of gods and commoners that came to this place was far fewer than the other main cities of the Hengshan Empire. However, Chang'e City was located on top of a divine vein, so the divine power of heaven and earth was abundant. The millions of miles of mountain range around the majestic city contained an endless supply of cultivation resources and treasures. As a result, the millions of celestial citizens in Perpetual Joy City were blessed by the heavens. They had countless experts and geniuses. After tens of thousands of years, the city still showed signs of vicissitudes. However, the city was exceptionally prosperous and prosperous. More than 6 million people of the god race lived and worked in peace. It was quite lively. The various trades and professions related to the cultivation of the divine way had also developed and expanded to the peak. Every few years or decades, Changle City would have a few great grandmasters who specialized in alchemy, artifact forging or formations. Of course, those were all divine lord realm powerhouses. If they were older, they would be respected by the people and would be recruited by the powerful forces of the empire. However, every few decades a few younger grandmasters would emerge. This was the proverbial genius. All kinds of alchemy geniuses, artifact forging geniuses, array formation geniuses. The citizens of Changle City were already used to it. A few months ago, Jiang Tianxing shouldered the Jiang clan's recruitment mission and came to the Hengshan Empire. After many searches and tests, he still couldn't find the ideal refining genius. Unknowingly, he heard that Changle City was blessed by the heavens and had many geniuses. Therefore, Jiang Tianxing came to Changle City full of anticipation and started to search for a target. He was different from Jiang Tianyi. Jiang Tianyi wanted to save time and directly occupied a land with a spirit vein. He spread the news to the outside world and challenged all the artifact forging grandmasters. In order to attract those artifact forging grandmasters, he pretended to be arrogant and set generous rewards. Then he would choose a suitable person from the many artifact forging grandmasters. Jiang Tianxing kept a low profile and wandered around Changle City, secretly observing and looking for a suitable target. Speaking of which, his luck was not bad. 10 days ago, 2 young geniuses had set up an arena at 100 Flower Garden in the southern part of the city and competed in terms of strength and artifact forging. After asking around, Jiang Tianxing found out that those 2 young geniuses were the most famous young geniuses in Changle City in the past 100 years. One of them was the first young master of a grand family called Lin Zhen. The other was the first senior brother of Changle Dao College called Zhou Xian. Both of them were very young and had just become high-level divine lords not long ago. They were skilled in artifact forging. As the saying went, a mountain could not accommodate 2 tigers. Moreover, these 2 top geniuses were equally proud and arrogant. Apart from cultivating the divine Tao, they were also skilled in artifact forging. The citizens of Changle City were divided into 2 factions, each supporting Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian. The 2 factions often argued and felt that their idols were the number 1 geniuses. For the title of number 1 genius of Changle City, Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian had been at odds with each other for many years. This time, the 2 geniuses argued again and competed in front of everyone in 100 Flower Garden to determine a winner. Jiang Tianxing snuck into 100 Flower Garden and observed the entire process. In the end, Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian were equally matched in strength. After fighting for half a day, there was still no winner. The 2 changed to artifact forging to see who could forge a supreme-grade monarch artifact faster. In the end, there was still no winner. Both of them took the same amount of time and created divine artifacts with their own merits. The spectating citizens were not satisfied and were used to this result. However, Jiang Tianxing was ecstatic because he had picked up a treasure. This was because Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian were the young geniuses he was looking for. He was confident that as long as he recruited these 2 geniuses into the Jiang clan and nurtured them well, they would become divine blacksmiths in the future. As for loyalty, Jiang Tianxing was not worried because the Jiang clan had rules. Anyone who entered the Jiang clan with a different surname had to marry a member of the Jiang clan to be recognized by the Jiang clan. This way, their descendants would also have the bloodline of the Jiang clan. This way, the Jiang clan would be able to absorb new blood and strengthen their foundation. Jiang Tianxing used a little trick to find Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian and tried to recruit them. The 2 geniuses were very proud, but Jiang Tianxing's casual demonstration of his skills stunned them. Then he revealed his identity and background as well as his strength as a middle-level divine blacksmith, which won the respect of the 2 geniuses. With his glib tongue, the 2 geniuses understood the Jiang clan's strong foundation and saw the hope of becoming divine blacksmiths. Therefore, the 2 geniuses were willing to follow Jiang Tianxing and cultivate in the Jiang clan. However, something awkward happened. When the agreed time came, Jiang Tianxing wanted to bring the 2 geniuses out of Changle City, but they both changed their minds. The reason was simple. The 2 geniuses were like fire and water. If there was one, there would be no other. No matter how Jiang Tianxing tried to persuade or mediate, the two geniuses would not give in. He could only bring one of them with him. At this moment, the second disciple of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect, Qianlan, appeared. Chapter 3469. The 100 Refinement Ancient Sect and the Jiang clan had an old grudge that hadn't been resolved even after thousands of years. Although Kenshin had helped the Jiang clan to tide over the crisis and suppress the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect in the past, the Jiang clan was still in danger. However, the 100 Refinements Ancient Sect would never forget this grudge. However, the boundless heaven continent was unified, and the Azura God Emperor controlled the world, desiring to disintegrate the various great ancient clans. The 18 ancient clans had no choice but to form an alliance. The 100 Refinement Ancient Sect could only suppress their hatred and temporarily not fight with the Jiang clan to avoid destroying the ancient clan alliance. But even so, it was inevitable for them to fight in the dark. Jiang Tianxing had left the Divine Attraction Paradise not only to gain experience in the mortal world, but also to take on the mission of recruiting disciples. However, Qianlan was different. He was only using an excuse to leave the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect to settle some old grudges in the Hengshan Empire. Coincidentally, he came to Perpetual Joy City and sensed the aura of a divine king expert. Only then did he find Jiang Tianxing. Then he learned that Jiang Tianxing had recruited 2 refining geniuses, so he wanted to snatch them away. The Jiang clan wanted to absorb new blood, but so did the 100 Refinements Ancient Sect. In fact, the 18 ancient clans had to constantly absorb geniuses from other clans in order to maintain their prosperity for tens of thousands of years. Moreover, Qianlan knew that the 2 geniuses were not on good terms with each other, so she was even more determined to snatch him away. He also found 2 geniuses and used his identity as a disciple of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect to recruit them. Furthermore, he praised the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect to the heavens and banished the Jiang clan to the ground. He wanted to kidnap the 2 geniuses back. However, the 2 geniuses were very stubborn, and were resolutely unwilling to travel with each other. Qianlan could only think of another way. When Jiang Tianxing found out about this, he went to confront Qianlan in a fit of rage. When the 2 of them met, it was inevitable that they would quarrel, ridicule, and humiliate each other. Afterwards, the 2 of them got into a conflict and fought fiercely in the mountains outside the city, destroying tens of thousands of li of mountains and rivers. Qianlan was the second senior brother of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. He had cultivated for 10,000 years and was at the peak of the 6th level of the God King realm. Jiang Tianxing was the 9th young master of the Jiang clan. He had only cultivated for 7,000 years and was at the 5th level of the Divine King realm. The result was obvious. Jiang Tianxing was at a disadvantage and even suffered some injuries. Fortunately, both of them restrained themselves. It was more of a spar and neither of them dared to use too much force. If things got out of hand and the Jiang clan started a war with the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect, they would definitely be blamed by the other clans. After the conflict, Jiang Tianxing felt wronged and sent a message to Jiang Tianyi asking for help. The matter of recruiting the 2 geniuses had reached a stalemate. Both Jiang Tianxing and Qianlan were caught between a rock and a hard place. They could only try their best to persuade the 2 geniuses. It was a little unrealistic to take in both geniuses. However, both of them were unwilling to accept only one and give the other to the other. Of course, it wasn't as if they hadn't considered kidnapping the 2 geniuses by force. But he couldn't do that. After all, the Jiang clan and the 100 Refinements Ancient Sect could not afford to lose face like this. The primordial ancient clan had once stood at the peak of the continent, looking down on the common people. Now, if they wanted to recruit disciples from other clans, they actually had to resort to robbery? This was too humiliating. The sun was setting. In the Green Phoenix Manor, north of Chang'e City, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and Jiang Tianxing sat at the stone table under the pine tree, calmly drinking tea. This manor was located at the peak of Green Phoenix Peak, 800 miles north of Chang'e City. The entire manor was shrouded in clouds. The 3 of them sat in the manor, overlooking the nearby Chang'e City. Jiang Tianxing rubbed his brows in distress and said to Jiang Tianyi, "7th brother, the situation is like this. That brat Qianlan is unreasonable and despicable. No matter what, we can't let him have his way. Otherwise, the Jiang clan will be humiliated and I won't be able to raise my head in front of him in the future." Jiang Tianyi nodded slightly and said calmly, "Although Qianlan is strong, there is nothing to be afraid of. We'll go and meet him later." The main problem now is that the two young geniuses are competing with each other and can't tolerate each other. If we want to bring both of them back to the Jiang clan, we have to find a way to resolve the conflict and persuade them. Jiang Tianxing nodded and said, yes. Qinlan saw this point and pestered us relentlessly. He won't give up no matter what. His goal is clear. He has to snatch at least one of the young geniuses. If he works harder and manages to snatch both of them, he'll have profited greatly. This brat is too shameless. I was the one who discovered the two geniuses first. At the mention of this matter, Jiang Tianxing was filled with anger and kept complaining. Although he and Jiang Tianyi were half-brothers, their height and appearance were very similar, but Jiang Tianyi was different. However, there was a clear difference in the way they dressed and their temperaments. Jiang Tianyi had a head of white hair and wore a robe made of crane feathers. His clothes were snow white and his personality was more stable. Jiang Tianxing, on the other hand, had a head of golden hair and wore dark gold armor. He carried a divine sword on his back and his personality was more impulsive and immature. The two brothers discussed for a while but couldn't think of a feasible solution. Ji Tianxing, who had been silent all this time, spoke up at the right time. The situation isn't complicated. We can't let Qinlan have his way and we can't forcefully kidnap the two geniuses. Let's go find Qinlan and force him to back down. Then we'll find the two young geniuses and think of a way to persuade them to bring them back to the Jiang clan. There's no time to lose. Let's act quickly. Jiang Tianyi nodded and stood up subconsciously. Jiang Tianxing sat on the stone chair and turned his head to look at Ji Tianxing. He frowned and asked Jiang Tianyi, "Seventh brother, who is this person? Didn't I introduce him to you just now?" Jiang Tianyi glared at him unhappily. "This is young Master Tianxing, my friend." Jiang Tianxing frowned again and asked softly, "Seventh brother, this is a grudge between the Jiang clan and the 100 Refinements ancient sect. It's not appropriate for you to bring an outsider into this matter, right?" Jiang Tianyi purposely put on a stern face and slapped the back of his head. He said unhappily, "Little Zhou, be more polite to young Master Tianxing. Don't be rude. He's one of us, not an outsider. He's just a friend and not a disciple of the Jiang clan. How can he not be an outsider?" Jiang Tianxing held the back of his head and muttered, "If we really bring him to deal with Qinlan, the 100 Refinements ancient sect will definitely use this as an excuse and will be criticized by the other clans." Jiang Tianyi became even angrier and stared at him with a stern face. He shouted coldly, "Little Zhou, can you not be so stubborn? You don't believe me, right? Do you want me to tell you his true identity before you'll stop?" Hearing this, Jiang Tianxing's eyes lit up. He looked up expectantly and asked, "What do you mean, seventh brother? What other identity does he have? Tell me quickly." Jiang Tianyi realized that he had let it slip in a moment of desperation. However, Jiang Tianxing didn't let it go and insisted on telling him the answer. Jiang Tianyi was annoyed and could only sigh. He said solemnly, "Little Zhou, I'm only telling you this because you're my brother. However, you must keep it a secret." Jiang Tianxing was filled with anticipation and excitement. He nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Jiang Tianyi said with a serious face, "This young Master Tianxing is the great benefactor who saved our Jiang clan 1,000 years ago. Second uncle and third uncle are his in-name disciples. He's our Master Grandpa." Huh? Jiang Tianxing was petrified. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3470. Master Grandpa? Seventh brother, are you sure? I've never heard that you have such a friend. You didn't manage to recruit any armament refining geniuses and instead found a Master Grandpa for us? Jiang Tianxing regained his senses and was filled with disbelief and unwillingness. He looked at Jiang Tianyi and Ji Tianxing strangely. How can the benefactor who saved the Jiang clan 1,100 years ago be so young? Jiang Tianyi frowned. "Ninth brother, can you not be so shallow? Isn't it normal for an expert like young Master Tianxing to remain young forever?" Jiang Tianxing still didn't believe him and asked again, "Since that benefactor could save the Jiang clan and make second uncle and third uncle admire him, he must be at least a peak god king. Even if he isn't a peak god king, he should be a 9th stage realm upper-level god king, right? What about this young Master Tianxing? What realm is he at now?" Ugh. Jiang Tianyi was speechless and couldn't answer. No choice, he couldn't see through Ji Tianxing's cultivation realm. He could only see that Ji Tianxing's aura was restrained and his power was unfathomable. However, he recalled that Ji Tianxing had fought with Bai Feng for a long time and he wasn't able to defeat her. It was imaginable that Ji Tianxing shouldn't be a upper-level god king. Even if he was, his power should be about the same as Bai Feng around the 7th stage of the god king realm. This was indeed a suspicious point that couldn't be explained. Jiang Tianxing stared at him and asked, "Seventh brother, why aren't you talking?" Jiang Tianyi frowned and said sternly, "Ninth brother. How can you be so rude to question someone's cultivation realm? Anyway, you only need to know that young Master Tianxing can deal with Qinlan from the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect." Really? Jiang Tianxing was still suspicious and sized up Ji Tianxing before asking Jiang Tianyi, "Seventh brother, you can't joke about this. Since you're sure that he's the benefactor of the Jiang clan, why didn't you report to the clan leader?" Jiang Tianyi stared at him and said, "What's the use of reporting to the clan leader? Young Master Tianxing has already agreed to return to the Divine Attraction Paradise with me. At that time I want to give everyone a surprise." Hee. Jiang Tianxing put on a fake smile and curled his lips. "Anyway, this is your idea. It has nothing to do with me. Don't drag me into it." "You." Jiang Tianyi clenched his teeth in anger, wishing he could beat him up. This clearly showed that they didn't believe him and felt that he was fooling around. They were afraid that they would be implicated by him and be punished by the patriarch. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing said indifferently, "Jiang Tianxing, whether you believe it or not, let's put this matter aside for now. The most important thing right now is to have Jiang Tianyi accompany you to find Qinlan and resolve this matter as soon as possible. We don't have much time to waste." With his reminder, Jiang Tianyi finally remembered that stellar aspect divine envoy, domain lords and god kings were searching for them. The Hengshan region was right next to the Crimson Dragon region. If they were delayed for too long, there was no guarantee that Divine King Stellar Aspect and company would not come looking for them. Therefore, this matter had to be resolved quickly. Yes. Jiang Tianyi hurriedly nodded and said to Jiang Tianxing, "Ninth brother, where's Qinlan? Let's go find him now. This matter cannot be delayed lest something unexpected happens." Jiang Tianxing pointed to the southwest of Changle City and said, "That guy is at the Gold Laurel Palace. All right, let's go meet him now." Jiang Tianyi nodded and pulled Jiang Tianxing into the sky, flying towards Changle City. After flying for 1,000 feet, he realized that Ji Tianxing did not follow and was still standing in the manor. Moreover, Ji Tianxing sat back on the stone bench and continued drinking tea. Jiang Tianyi was stunned and asked without hesitation, "Young Master Tianxing, why aren't you coming with us?" Ji Tianxing nodded and smiled. "It's enough for the two of you to go. I'll wait here for your good news." Jiang Tianyi was immediately put in a difficult position. He smiled bitterly and said, "Young Master Tianxing, if you don't come with us, I don't feel confident." Jiang Tianxing curled his lips and looked at Ji Tianxing with a smile that was not a smile. He said, "You don't dare to go? Are you afraid that if we really fight you'll be exposed?" As soon as he finished speaking, Jiang Tianyi slapped him on the back of his head and said unhappily, "If you don't know how to speak, then shut up." Jiang Tianxing saw that his 7th brother was really angry and obediently shut up. Jiang Tianyi flew back to the manor and came before Ji Tianxing. He bowed sincerely and said, "Young Master Tianxing, my 9th brother is young and inexperienced. He has always lived in the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven and this is the first time he has gone out to train. Therefore he spoke without thinking and offended you. Please don't lower yourself to his level." Jiang Tianxing was the 9th genius of the Jiang clan and was called the 9th Young Master. He had a noble status. In the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven he was used to living like a prince. However, he had lived for 7,000 years and was called young and inexperienced by Jiang Tianyi. Ji Tianxing was speechless. After all, he had lived for less than 2,000 years in both lifetimes. There was no comparison between people. However, since Jiang Tianyi said so, he had to go. Otherwise, it would seem that he was too petty and would really argue with Jiang Tianxing. Helpless, Ji Tianxing could only nod and say, "Jiang Tianyi, you misunderstand. Since you insist on inviting me, then I'll go with you." Seeing that he agreed, Jiang Tianyi breathed a sigh of relief. Then the three of them flew through the sky and went straight to the Gold Osmanthus Palace in the southwest of Changle City. The sun gradually set and night was about to arrive. The Gold Osmanthus Palace was lit. Qinlan, dressed in a black robe, was sitting in the study and carefully reading a book. He looked like a young man in his 30s. He was tall and muscular with thick eyebrows and big eyes. Behind him stood a white-haired elder in a black robe, dressed like a bodyguard. He stood with his hands by his side. Young Master Lon, this is the detailed information on Lin Zhen and the battle dragon elephant, including the Lin clan and Changle Dao College. I have investigated it thoroughly. I think that if we want to recruit these two blacksmithing geniuses, we can find another breakthrough and have a chance. Qinlan nodded and said, Okay, then I will take a good look at this information. At this moment, the voice of a guard sounded at the door of the study. Sir, there is a young man with the surname Zhang outside. He wants to see you. Obviously, only the white-haired elder was from the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. He followed Qinlan to serve and protect him. All the guards and maids in the Gold Osmanthus Palace were from Changle City. However, Qinlan had spent a considerable amount of money to rent this palace temporarily. Jiang Tianxing? That brat is here to humiliate himself again? Qinlan closed the book and put it into his spatial ring. His lips curled into a cold smile. Uncle Yen, let's go see what that brat is up to. With that, he brought Uncle Yen out of the study and rushed to the guest hall. In the hall, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianxing, and Jiang Tianyi were all seated and drinking tea. As soon as Qinlan entered the hall, he laughed mockingly and said, Jiang Tianxing, was the beating from before not enough? Do you want to be beaten again tonight? Chapter 3471. His voice was heard before he even saw him. Qinlan's arrogant tone caused Jiang Tianxing's face to turn green. His eyes were filled with anger. He immediately stood up and retorted coldly, Qinlan, don't be so smug. Tonight my seventh brother will teach you a lesson and let you know the immensity of heaven and earth. As soon as Jiang Tianxing finished speaking, Qinlan appeared in the main hall with the white-robed old man. He glanced at Jiang Tianxing before his gaze landed on Jiang Tianyi and Ji Tianxing. As for Ji Tianxing, he only glanced at him and skipped over him. After all, Ji Tianxing was drinking tea with a calm expression. His aura was restrained and he was as low-key as an ordinary person. On the other hand, Jiang Tianyi's face was stern and his body emitted a divine aura that could not be underestimated. Qinlan sized Jiang Tianyi up and sneered. Did you beat up the small one and then the big one came? Jiang Tianxing, you're really something. You're a piece of trash and you asked your brother to support you? I was wondering why you suddenly became so bold and dared to take the initiative to come here. So it's because you found a backer. As he spoke, Qinlan sat down on the main seat and said disdainfully, It's a pity that your seventh brother Jiang Tianyi is not my match. You guys are destined to be humiliated. Qinlan's words and attitude were extremely arrogant. He did not put Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianyi in his eyes at all. Jiang Tianyi's face turned green as he clenched his fists tightly. Jiang Tianyi, on the other hand, was calm. He looked at Qinlan with a cold smile and said mockingly, My ninth brother is the youngest among the 9 geniuses of the Jiang clan and is ranked last. You, the second senior brother of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect, are proud of defeating him and are still acting so smug. It seems like the disciples of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect are only so capable. What did you say? Qinlan's face darkened and his eyes were filled with anger. Jiang Tianyi laughed even more mockingly and said, Although I'm only ranked 7th among the 9 disciples of the Jiang clan, it's still enough. Against you, the second senior brother of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect, it's enough. You dare to look down on me? Qinlan's expression darkened as he growled angrily, Kid, if I don't teach you an unforgettable lesson, you won't know how powerful I am. As he spoke, his entire body burst forth with surging divine power aura. Clearly he was about to attack. But Jiang Tianyi smiled contemptuously and said, Talking to a boor like you is really tiring. Very angry, right? You want to fight, don't you? It's a pity that Lin Zhen and the battle dragon elephant are not going to compete in fighting, but in refining weapons. Qinlan frowned deeply and remained silent. Indeed, he had defeated Jiang Tianxing. However, Lin Zhen and Zhan Longxiang were not persuaded by him to follow him back to the 100 Refinement's ancient sect. After a moment of silence, he asked, So what you mean is, you want to compete with me in refining? Of course. Jiang Tianyi sneered with a mocking expression. We're all disciples of forging families. What else can we compete in? Could it be that they were going to have a duel? Then let our second brother compete with you. I guarantee that he will beat you up so badly that even your mother won't be able to recognize you. You're courting death. Qinlan was so angry that his face turned black and his chest rose and fell rapidly. The white-haired elder frowned slightly and hurriedly sent a message to remind him, "Young Master Lan, please calm down. The other party obviously came prepared and purposely provoked you." Only then did Qinlan come to his senses and nod silently. He then looked at Zhang Tianyi and asked, "Tell me, how do you want to compete?" Zhang Tianyi answered without hesitation, "We'll compete to see who can successfully forge the most perfect divine weapon in the shortest amount of time. Whoever loses will withdraw from this competition and will not be allowed to touch the two forging geniuses." Seeing how confident Zhang Tianyi was, Qinlan was stunned and frowned as he considered it. "From what I know, Zhang Tianyi's forging skills can only be considered above average. His experience, skills, and maturity should be slightly weaker than mine. I can't possibly lose to him. But for him to be so confident, does he have something to rely on?" Thinking of this, Qinlan became more cautious and asked Zhang Tianyi, "Where will we compete? When will we compete? Will you compete with me?" He had to ask clearly to avoid falling into Zhang Tianyi's trap. Zhang Tianyi explained patiently, "Tonight in the Gold Laurel Palace, the winner will be decided by 2 out of 3 wins. All 3 of us can participate in the competition. Similarly, you and that old man can also participate." Qinlan frowned again and sank into deep thought. 2 out of 3 wins. If that's the case, one person is indeed not enough. It's almost impossible to forge 3 weapons in a short amount of time. That kid Jiang Tianxing is too weak. Even if he participates in the competition, he will lose without a doubt and can be ignored. It seems that Zhang Tianyi and that white-robed youth will be the ones to compete. Thinking of this, Qinlan stared closely at Ji Tianxing and muttered to himself, "This kid looks ordinary and doesn't look like a divine craftsman. What is Zhang Tianyi doing?" At this moment, the white-haired elder reminded him, "Young Master Lan, that kid is human and very unfamiliar. He doesn't look like a Jiang clan disciple." Qinlan's eyes lit up. He pointed at Ji Tianxing and shouted at Zhang Tianyi, "Zhang Tianyi, who is that kid? How come I don't know that the Jiang clan has such a person? This is a matter between our sect and the Jiang clan. Why are you asking an outsider for help?" Zhang Tianyi was prepared. Without waiting for Ji Tianxing to reply, he took the initiative to answer. "This young master Tianxing joined the Jiang clan 1,000 years ago. He just hasn't shown himself. I can swear to the heavens that he is definitely a Jiang clan disciple." Zhang Tianyi thought to himself, "Young master Tianxing is our clan's benefactor and the master of second uncle and third uncle. He should be considered a Jiang clan disciple, right?" Qinlan couldn't refute this. He looked at Ji Tianxing a few more times but couldn't find any clues. He could only nod and agree. "All right, then we'll follow this rule." Zhang Tianyi raised his hand and said, "Wait. We still have to summon the 2 blacksmithing geniuses and let them watch the competition with their own eyes. Only in this way will they know what choice they should make." "All right." Qinlan had the same idea, so she nodded and agreed without any hesitation. Then Qinlan and Zhang Tianxing took out jade slips and sent messages to Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang. Everyone waited for a few minutes before the 2 blacksmithing geniuses arrived one after another. Lin Zhen was dressed luxuriously and had greasy hair and a powdered face. He was the standard young master of an aristocratic family. Zhang Longxiang had a rough appearance and was dressed simply. He even wore the Daoist robes of Changle Dao College and a square crown on his head. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. After the 2 blacksmithing geniuses arrived, Qinlan explained the situation to them and the meaning of the competition. Lin Zhen smiled and was full of anticipation, waiting to watch a good show. Zhang Longxiang was expressionless and said in a low voice, "Even if the 2 divine blacksmiths decide the winner, Lin Zhen and I will not join the same sect." Qinlan was a little embarrassed and hurriedly explained, "It's okay. This competition is only to decide who will withdraw." Actually, he hated Zhang Longxiang. This fellow looked rough and had a very old-fashioned and dull personality. He was not as smart as Lin Zhen and was more likable. Chapter 3472. The rules had been set. Those who were supposed to be there had arrived. Hence, Qinlan asked Uncle Yen to close the doors of the Gold Kasha Palace. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Qinlan waved his hand and shot out hundreds of divine lights into the ground. In an instant, several divine arrays were activated and enveloped the entire palace. In this way, no one would be disturbed while refining weapons in the palace. The first round would be between Jiang Tianyi and Qinlan. Uncle Yan instructed Qinlan. Qinlan nodded to indicate that she understood. Only then did she step into the hall. Jiang Tianyi took a deep breath and calmed himself down before walking to the center of the palace. Jiang Tianxing quickly cheered him on and waved his fist. "Seventh brother, I believe you can do it." Jiang Tianyi turned around and smiled at him. Then he looked at Ji Tianxing. Actually, what he cared about the most was Ji Tianxing's attitude. Unfortunately, Ji Tianxing looked indifferent, as if he didn't take it to heart. Jiang Tianyi was a little depressed. He could only turn around and walk to the center of the palace. He and Qinlan sat cross-legged 1,000 feet apart, one on the left and one on the right. In the first round, let's see who can refine a low-grade king-grade divine artifact faster. How about it? Qinlan was the first to speak as he stared at Jiang Tianyi. His strength was similar to Jiang Tianyi's at the 6th level of the Divine King realm. However, he had cultivated for a long time and had reached the peak of the 6th level. He had refined at least 80 king-grade low-grade divine artifacts, if not 100. He was confident that he could beat Jiang Tianyi. Of course, Jiang Tianyi couldn't show his fear. He nodded without hesitation. All right. Then the first round began. Both of them took out their cauldrons as fast as they could. Jiang Tianyi's bronze cauldron and Qinlan's cauldron were both mid-grade king-grade artifacts. Both of them were outstanding middle-grade divine blacksmiths. The moment they took out their cauldrons, they immediately entered a state of full concentration. An invisible aura emanated from their bodies. Both of them forgot about their surroundings and immersed themselves in refining weapons. First, he cast the spell and activated the array formation in the cauldron. Once the divine flames in the cauldron rose and the temperature was suitable, he added the refining materials. Their movements were extremely orderly, extremely skilled, precise, and without the slightest hesitation. Even the materials used by the two of them were the same. 9 sets. Furthermore, the divine weapons they were going to refine were the same. They were both divine swords. There was no other way. Most of the king-grade divine artifacts they refined were weapons. Among the weapons, swords were the most common. Seeing the chemistry between Qinlan and Jiang Tianyi, as well as their skill and speed in smithing, the crowd's interest was piqued. Uncle Yan stood in the upper left corner of the hall, his eyes fixed on Qinlan. Ji Tianxing and Jiang Tianxing sat on the right side of the hall. Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang sat near the entrance of the main hall, separated by a few hundred feet. Even though they didn't get along. But at this moment both of them had neglected each other. They all stared at Qinlan and Jiang Tianyi with rapt attention. They carefully watched the artifact forging, afraid that they would miss any detail. The main hall was silent and the atmosphere was solemn. But Ji Tianxing's reaction was calm. He didn't pay attention to the two divine blacksmiths and wasn't as nervous as Jiang Tianxing. No one knew. Actually, he already had an answer in his heart and predicted the outcome. Time passed very quickly. Unknowingly, 20 hours had passed in the main hall. At this time it was just midnight outside the main hall. Only 4 hours had passed. Without a doubt, the divine formation that enveloped the main hall had a time array formation that sped up time by 5 times. Ji Tianxing noticed this and felt slightly comforted. Fortunately, there's time acceleration. Otherwise, waiting for so long would be too boring. As for Uncle Yan, Jiang Tianxing, Lin Zhen, and Zhang Longxiang, they couldn't feel the passage of time at all. All their attention was on Jiang Tianyi and Qinlan, and their hearts were in their throats. At this time, Qinlan and Jiang Tianyi had finished forging the sword embryos and were beginning to inscribe the laws and restriction runes on them. From the looks of it, the two of them were equally matched in terms of speed. But the most crucial moment had arrived. The speed, accuracy, and success rate of inscribing laws and restriction runes were the criteria that determined a divine blacksmith's skill. Jiang Tianxing and Uncle Yan's expressions became even more solemn. Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang were even more engrossed as they analyzed and guessed in their hearts. These two divine blacksmiths seem to be equally skilled. I wonder who will win. Currently, it seems that the divine blacksmith of the Jiang clan has a more stable and reserved personality. He should be easier to get along with. If I enter the Jiang clan, he should take care of me, right? Although divine blacksmith Qinlan of the 100 Refinement Ancient sect is arrogant, he's the easiest to serve. I only need to put in some effort to win his favor. Hopefully divine blacksmith Qinlan will win. Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang each had their own thoughts. Unknowingly, another 6 days passed. Qinlan and Jiang Tianyi's forging was nearing the end. Their swords were layered with more than 90 laws and restrictions and more than 900 types of laws and restrictions. Only now did the gap between their forging speed widen slightly. When Qinlan finished inscribing the 97th law rune, Jiang Tianyi had only finished the 96th law rune and was still inscribing restrictions and restrictions. Such a small difference naturally couldn't escape the eyes of Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianxing and Uncle Yan. Ji Tianxing's expression was still calm. Jiang Tianxing's expression became more solemn and anxious. Uncle Yan, on the other hand, heaved a sigh of relief and had a gratified smile on his face. As long as there were no accidents, the outcome was set. However, Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian couldn't see what was going on inside the cauldron and didn't know the difference between the two divine blacksmiths. An hour passed, 2 hours passed. Finally, another hour and a half passed. Qinlan had successfully inscribed 100 laws and 1,000 restrictions. He was the first to complete the low-grade king-grade divine sword. Phew, Qinlan stopped and let out a long breath. He used his sleeve to wipe away the sweat on his forehead. He raised his head and looked at Jiang Tianyi. Seeing that Jiang Tianyi wasn't done yet, he smiled smugly. Ah, Jiang Tianyi, oh Jiang Tianyi, I thought you were very capable. I didn't expect you to be so arrogant with just this little bit of skill. Qinlan laughed smugly and mocked Jiang Tianyi mercilessly. Jiang Tianyi was already very anxious, and when he heard Qinlan's cold laughter he became even more anxious and his expression turned ugly. However, he wasn't distracted by Qinlan. He pursed his lips and continued with the finishing touches. Although he had already lost, he couldn't give up halfway. He still had to complete the forging. Moreover, he still had a glimmer of hope. Perhaps the divine sword he forged would be more successful and perfect than Qinlan's? Jiang Tianxing was also dejected. His eyes were filled with disappointment as he muttered to himself, "How can this be? Seventh brother's skill in forging is in the top 3 among us 9 brothers." Wonderful Book House. Chapter 3473. Jiang Tianxing could not accept this result. He even thought that losing to Qinlan meant that he could only withdraw from the competition for the blacksmithing genius. "I can't accept this. I was the one who found these 2 blacksmithing geniuses first." Jiang Tianxing roared in his heart. He clenched his fists so tightly that the veins on the back of his hands popped out. On the other side, Uncle Yan puffed out his chest with a proud smile on his face. Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian had different expressions. Zhou Xian frowned, clearly surprised and disappointed. However, Lin Zhen raised his brows, his eyes filled with anticipation and joy. Qinlan was not in a hurry to open the cauldron lid. He continued to mock Jiang Tianyi and harassed him with words to buy time. Fortunately, Jiang Tianyi had strong willpower and turned a deaf ear to his words. After another quarter of an hour, Jiang Tianyi finally completed the forging of the divine sword. When he stopped, Qinlan sneered contemptuously, "You've already lost and you're still putting on airs?" Jiang Tianyi said expressionlessly, "As a blacksmith and a divine blacksmith, the most basic requirement is to never give up on a piece of work easily. This is a form of respect for the materials and oneself. A loss is a loss. Why are you still so stubborn?" Qinlan pursed his lips in disdain and sneered. "You were 15 minutes slower than me. That's enough to see the difference in strength." Jiang Tianyi did not bicker with him. He said coldly, "You can't make a conclusion without seeing the divine sword. All right, I'll make you give up then." Qinlan smiled disdainfully and opened the cauldron lid. Zhoosh! A golden arc flew out of the cauldron and lit up with a dazzling golden light. It was like the sun hanging in the sky, illuminating the entire hall. Everyone's eyes were focused on the golden arc. They saw a golden divine sword about 3 feet long and 2 inches wide floating in the air. The sword was dignified and holy. It looked like a swimming dragon and the sword light was dense and hazy. It was definitely the best among the low-grade king-level divine weapons. Uncle Yan was the first to clap and cheer. Young Master Lan is extremely talented and his blacksmithing skills have reached perfection. This sword is of the best quality. Lin Zhen also cheered and said excitedly, "Good sword. What a peerless sword." Although the battle dragon-esque elephant did not say anything, its eyes were burning. It was obvious that it approved and was excited. Qinlan laughed heartily. "Ah, Jiang Tianyi, did you see that clearly? Learn from him. However, I feel that you won't be able to learn it at all. Jiang Tianxing curled his lips angrily and said, "What are you so proud of? Seventh brother's divine weapon hasn't shown up yet." As his voice fell, Jiang Tianyi waved his hand and opened the lid. Swish! A streak of scarlet light soared into the sky, bringing with it a fearful sword radiance. It was like a bloody sun in the sky, illuminating the entire hall red. Within the blood-red light was a broadsword that was about 5 feet long and as wide as a palm. It was emitting a heavy and sacred pressure. This sword wasn't as dignified and divine as Qin Lan's golden sword. It was more like a sword of slaughter that could split the heavens and the earth apart. It was filled with an iron-blooded domineering aura and a might that looked down upon all living beings. If Qin Lan's work was described as a monarch's sword, then Jiang Tianyi's divine sword would be an overlord's sword. Without a doubt, this sword was also a top-grade low-grade king-grade god artifact. Jiang Tianxing was the first to applaud. He shouted, "Did you see that? Seventh brother's divine sword is even more powerful and domineering than yours. Your sword is a woman's sword. Seventh brother's bloody slaughter divine sword is a real man's weapon." Qin Lan's expression didn't look too good as he glared at Jiang Tianxing. Uncle Yen was silent and didn't comment. He was also someone who knew his stuff. Of course, he knew that both swords were top grade. It was hard to tell which was better. Lin Jun frowned and didn't say anything. He had to admit that the bloody slaughter divine sword was very impressive. On the other hand, Zhang Longxiang's face was filled with excitement and admiration. His face was flushed red. He didn't say anything, but he was screaming in his heart, "What a peerless divine weapon! This is the sword that I've been dreaming of." The hall fell into a short period of silence. Qin Lan frowned and said, "Jiang Tianyi, everyone's eyes are clear. I'll be fair and objective and say that the bloody slaughter divine sword you refined is also a top-grade weapon. In terms of divine sword quality, you and I are tied. However, you were 15 minutes slower than me. That's the truth. Therefore you still lost." Jiang Tianyi couldn't refute and could only silently put away the bloody slaughter divine sword and divine furnace. But Jiang Tianxing was very unconvinced. He still wanted to quibble but didn't know what to say. The first round ended just like that. Qin Lan looked askance at Jiang Tianyi and said with a cold smile, "How is it? You're not convinced of your loss, right? Want another round? Anyway, it's decided in 3 rounds. You still have 2 chances." Qin Lan was very cunning. Although he had just refined an artifact and used up a lot of divine power. If they continued to compete, his speed would definitely decrease several times. However, Jiang Tianyi was the same as him. His strength and foundation were inferior to his, and his speed would be even slower. If they continued to compete in the second round, Jiang Tianyi would still lose to him. And he would lose even more miserably. Best of 3. If Jiang Tianyi lost 2 rounds in a row, he could scram with his tail between his legs. Everyone present understood Qin Lan's intentions. Jiang Tianyi naturally wasn't willing to take the bait. He said with a cold smile, "You'd better save it. Also best of 3. You've only won 1 round. Don't be smug too early." Then he ignored Qin Lan's mockery and walked toward Jiang Tianxing and Ji Tianxing. Everyone thought that he would meditate for a while before competing with Qin Lan. However, to everyone's surprise, he walked straight to Ji Tianxing and bowed respectfully with a sincere expression. "Young Master Tianxing, I can only rely on you." Jiang Tianyi bowed very low with a sincere expression. Qin Lan, Uncle Yen, Lin Jun, and Zhang Longxiang all looked at Ji Tianxing. Jiang Tianxing was also surprised. He pulled Jiang Tianyi's sleeve and asked, "Seventh brother, you're not going to compete? You're letting him compete in your place? Can he do it?" Jiang Tianyi ignored him and maintained his bow. Ji Tianxing frowned slightly. He looked at Jiang Tianyi and asked, "Are you sure you want me to compete? Are you not going to compete?" Jiang Tianyi replied in a low and depressed tone, "I'm indeed not his match. After all, I'm 3,000 years younger than him and my cultivation is not as profound as his. Now only you can secure the victory and force Qin Lan to withdraw. Otherwise, the 2 blacksmithing geniuses will be taken away by the 100 smelting ancient sect. The Jiang clan will lose face." Ji Tianxing was silent for a moment, then nodded and said, "All right, I'll help you one more time for your sake. Get up." Jiang Tianyi stood up with a gratified smile. He said solemnly, "Thank you for your help, young master. I will never forget it." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and didn't say anything. He stood up and walked to the center of the hall. At this moment Qianlong frowned and asked coldly, "Kid, who are you?" Uncle Yen also said expressionlessly, "An outsider has no right to interfere with the battle between our sect and the Jiang clan. Young man, if you don't reveal your identity, don't blame me for throwing you out of the Gold Laurel Palace." Chapter 3474. Previously, Qianlong and Uncle Yen had suspected Ji Tianqing's identity. However, he kept a low profile and did not attract any attention. Hence, the two of them did not pay much attention to him. However, it was different now. Jiang Tianyi had lost the first round, but he wanted to invite Ji Tianqing to participate in the second round. Moreover, Jiang Tianyi was very respectful towards Ji Tianqing, as if he was facing an elder. However, there was no such young human among the elders, protectors and leaders of the Jiang clan. How could Qianlong and Uncle Yen not be suspicious? Faced with the two's questioning, Jiang Tianyi frowned and hesitated whether to reveal Ji Tianqing's true identity. At this moment, Ji Tianqing looked at Uncle Yen with a smile and mocked, "Yen Shangao, it's been 1,000 years and you haven't improved at all. Alright, is your illegitimate son still alive? Don't tell me you've decided to kill him for justice?" He paused for a while and muttered to himself, "However, with your character, you'll probably kill your illegitimate son to protect yourself. After all, your wife is a direct descendant of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. If you want to hug the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect's thigh, you have to show your determination." Upon hearing this, Uncle Yen, who was still domineering just a moment ago, froze. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. His expression was extremely ugly. His eyes were wide open as he stared fixedly at Ji Tianqing. His eyes were filled with fear. "Who are you? Don't slander me and tarnish my reputation." Uncle Yen was shocked, but he still maintained his rationality and quickly denied it. However, his reaction had already betrayed him. Everyone knew that Ji Tianqing was right. Even Qianlong was stunned. She looked at Uncle Yen with a strange look in her eyes. Seeing Qianlan's reaction, Ji Tianqing ignored Uncle Yen and said to Qianlong, "Second brother Qian, it seems like you don't know Yen Shangao well. This old man used to be the guard commander of the treasury and was a person of high status. However, 1,000 years ago, the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect suddenly announced that he would be stripped of his position and demoted to your housekeeper and guard. Don't you understand what's going on? Maybe you're still feeling complacent and think that the sect thinks highly of you, so you did it on purpose, right?" Qianlong was at a loss for words. She wanted to retort but she couldn't. Uncle Yan's expression turned even uglier. His eyes were as sharp as swords as he glared at Ji Tianqing. In a low voice he asked, "Boy, who are you?" Ji Tianqing smiled contemptuously and said in an indifferent tone, "Yen Shangao, not to mention you, even if your sect leader Su Bailian was here, he wouldn't dare to be impudent in front of this king. There are 800 outer disciples, 200 inner disciples, 9 elite disciples, 12 elders, the left and right protectors, the sect leader and the vice-sect leader. I know all of them like the back of my hand. Can you guess who this prince is? In terms of seniority, both of you should address this prince as Old Master." Qianlong and Uncle Yen were dumbfounded. They stared at him with their mouths agape. Their first reaction was disbelief. Not only was this human young man young, but he was also a nobody. How could he have such a high seniority? Qianlong and Uncle Yen were furious. They felt that the other party was bluffing and even humiliating them. However, both of them suppressed their anger and didn't dare to be impudent. After all, Ji Tianqing's tone was calm and confident. It was as if he was telling the truth. He wasn't pretending. Moreover, he knew the situation of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect very well. His words were clear and logical. He even dared to call the sect leader of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect by his name. In an instant, Qianlong and Uncle Yen were stunned. They couldn't tell if it was true or false. The two of them looked at each other and discussed secretly through voice transmission. "Uncle Yen, can you guess who this boy is? Is there such a human young man among the seniors who have dealings with our sect?" "Qianlong, don't be fooled by him. This boy is so young. How can he be a senior?" "Uncle Yen, to us divine king powerhouses, maintaining a youthful appearance isn't anything difficult. Moreover, there are many old monsters who have lived for tens of thousands of years who like to disguise themselves as handsome young men. This guy doesn't look like he's lying. If he really is a senior, won't we offend him?" Qianlong was obviously stunned and didn't dare to act rashly. However, Uncle Yen shook his head secretly and objected. I feel that the probability of this is not high. What if he's pretending and we're still fooled? Won't that be embarrassing? Qianlan frowned and said in a low voice, Uncle Yen, he knows the situation of our sect like the back of his hand. Also, what he said about you just now, is it true? Uncle Yan's expression was very awkward. He turned his head and said, Young Master Lan, can we not talk about this? Qianlan spread out his hands and said, Then it's true? Since that's the case, we'd rather believe it's true than not. Anyway, we're only competing with him in weapon refinement. We won't fight to the death. No matter if he's real or fake, we won't lose anything if we don't harp on this question. Uncle Yen remained silent, which was a tacit agreement. At this time, Ji Tianqing looked at Qianlan with a smile that didn't look like a smile. He asked, Are the two of you done muttering? Who still has objections to my identity? Uncle Yen remained silent and glared at him angrily. Qianlan wanted to ask who Ji Tianqing was, but Ji Tianqing's words made his body tense up and his hair stand on end. 1,125 years ago, 3 disciples of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect entered the mysterious Nether Cave to explore. You were one of them, right? 2 of them died and only you came out alive. Have you found out the cause of their deaths? Although Ji Tianqing seemed to be asking casually, a cold smile appeared on his face. However, there was a cold smile on his lips as he stared at Qianlan with a meaningful look in his eyes. That deep and cold gaze seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. Qianlan's heart clenched and cold sweat broke out on his back. Even his expression was a little stiff. Others didn't know the truth, but he was well aware. He was the one who caused the death of one of the disciples. In order to cover up the truth, he killed the other disciple. After escaping the mysterious Nether Cave, he lied that the 2 disciples were attacked by ferocious beasts and that he had risked his life to escape. The 100 Refinement Ancient Sect investigated for a period of time, but nothing was found. Everyone had forgotten about this matter and Qianlan had also thrown it to the back of his mind. Now that Ji Tianqing mentioned it, it seemed like he was reminding him of something. Qianlan immediately became vigilant and fearful. He was afraid that he would expose himself, so he quickly smiled and said, Young Master Tianqing, you must be joking. The sect has already investigated this matter. Ji Tianqing didn't pursue the matter. He smiled and said, Can we start the second round now? Qianlan secretly sighed in relief and quickly nodded. Yes, of course. Ji Tianqing looked at him from the corner of his eyes and sneered. You seem to be very guilty. Could it be that paper can't wrap fire and you've exposed yourself? Qianlan's nerves, which had just relaxed, instantly tensed up again. Her heart thumped. When he saw Uncle Yan's doubtful and scrutinizing gaze, his mind went blank. He stopped breathing and his limbs turned cold. Chapter 3475. At that moment Qianlan was truly scared out of his wits. The rules of the 100 Refinements Ancient Sect were very strict. Once the sect found out that he had harmed a fellow disciple, only death awaited him. Furthermore, the disciples of the sect could expose each other. For example, if Uncle Yen exposed this matter to the sect, he would be rewarded greatly. Perhaps his punishment would be revoked, and he would be able to return to guard the treasury and be the leader of the guards. That was why Qianlan was so terrified. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and smiled. I was just joking with you. Look at how scared you are. Only then did Qianlan feel as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Her suspended heart finally settled back into her stomach, and her soul that had flown out of the heavens returned to her body. He forced an ugly smile on his pale face and said in a hoarse voice, Young Master Tianqing, you can't joke about this. It'll kill someone. Uncle Yen retracted his suspicious gaze and remained silent. Ji Tianqing sat down cross-legged and took out the 9 Heavens cauldron. All right, let's not waste any more time. Let's start the competition. Which one of you will fight? Qianlan secretly wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and pointed at Uncle Yen. He will fight. I need to rest for a few days. He will fight this round. Uncle Yen was prepared for this, so he wasn't surprised. However, he frowned and looked at Qianlan. Young Master Lan, I'm not a direct disciple of the sect. My skills in refining weapons are very ordinary. I can't compare to you. This guy's background is mysterious, so his skills must be extraordinary. His skills in refining weapons must be superb. If I fight him, I'll most likely lose. Qianlan didn't panic and replied calmly, Uncle Yen, don't worry. This is just a temporary measure. Don't forget we'll win 2 out of 3 rounds. I've already won 1 round, so it's fine even if you lose to him. In the 3rd round it'll still be me versus Zhou Xian. They'll definitely lose. Uncle Yen was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He nodded in agreement. That's right. This guy needs to rest after the competition. Zhou Xian will fight the 3rd round. Thinking of this, he calmed down and no longer felt pressured. Alright, I'll fight you in the 2nd round. Uncle Yen regained his dignified aura and walked to the center of the hall. He was 100 meters away from Ji Tianxing. He took out a king-level divine cauldron and sat cross-legged on the ground. Young Master Tianxing, you think too highly of yourself. You even consider yourself our senior. Then this old man would like to see if your attainments and strength in refining artifacts are as big as your words. Ji Tianxing looked at him with a smile and said lightly, "You're just cannon fodder. Don't give yourself more drama." Uncle Yan's face turned red, but he couldn't say a single word of rebuttal. Zhou Xian and Zhou Tianxing both held their stomachs and laughed out loud. Even Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang smiled. The atmosphere in the main hall was finally not so oppressive anymore. Soon the competition between Ji Tianxing and Uncle Yen began. The two of them activated the array formation in the divine cauldron and began to adjust the divine flames and the temperature in the cauldron to prepare for the refinement. An hour later, the preparations were complete. The two of them took out the materials and added them into the cauldron. The competition was still about refining a king-level low-grade divine artifact. Uncle Yen took out 10 sets of materials to refine a divine sword. Ji Tianxing took out 8 sets of materials to refine a divine armor. Qinlan, Zhang Tianxing, and the others were shocked when they saw the materials used by the two of them. They were filled with doubt. That's a king-level low-grade divine artifact. He needs at least 9 sets of materials to succeed. He only used 8 sets. Even Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang looked at Ji Tianxing in a different light. They were looking forward to it. He wants to refine a king-level divine artifact with only 8 sets of materials? It seems like this Tianxing has a special refining technique that's better than Qinlan and Zhang Tianyi's. Out of everyone present, only Zhang Tianyi had a smile on his face. He was already used to it. After that, Ji Tianxing and Uncle Yen both focused on casting their spells and forging tools. Uncle Yen gave it his all. He was especially serious and focused. His nerves were tense. Although he was cannon fodder, Qinlan expected him to lose. But he wanted to prove himself and give it his all. If he beat Ji Tianxing, not only would he be proud, but he would also win the competition and force the Jiang clan out of the competition. Then he would have made a contribution. On the other hand, Ji Tianxing's expression was calm and indifferent. There was a sense of leisure in his concentration. It was as if he wasn't refining artifacts, completing a mission, or competing with others. It was as if he was drinking tea, admiring the moon, and appreciating paintings. His mental state was relaxed. But his hand movements were as smooth as flowing water. It was too fast for the eyes to take in, and it was accurate. He used different methods in the early, middle, and late stages of refining the divine armor. They were all refining techniques that no one had ever heard of before. They were mysterious and profound. Qinlan, Zhang Tianyi, Zhang Tianxing, Lin Zhen, and Zhang Longxiang stared at him. Their eyes were filled with amazement and admiration. Especially Zhang Longxiang. His eyes were burning and his heart was filled with adoration. Time passed quickly and no one noticed. Unknowingly, 7 days had passed. Ji Tianxing finally finished his refinement and stopped his work. His expression was still calm and there wasn't even a bead of sweat on his forehead. He looked especially relaxed. After he finished refining, he didn't say anything. He just sat on the spot and closed his eyes, waiting silently. The 9th heaven cauldron that was spinning quickly also stopped. It floated motionlessly. Seeing him do that, Zhang Tianyi, Zhang Tianxing, Lin Zhen, and Zhang Longxiang all looked at Qinlan. Qinlan was embarrassed. He was too ashamed to show his face. After all, he was very proud of himself after refining the artifact. He even mocked and harassed Zhang Tianyi. Compared to Ji Tianxing's actions, he was a despicable person. Ji Tianxing had the demeanor of a grandmaster and the bearing of a divine blacksmith. Embarrassed by everyone's gazes, Qinlan could only change the topic. He pursed his lips and said, "So what if his refining techniques are fancy? Didn't he use 7 days just like me? Even if he were to compete with me, we would only be able to tie." No one said anything. They couldn't refute him. After that, the crowd waited for another 12 hours before Uncle Yen finally completed the refinement. Phew! After he stopped, Uncle Yen let out a sigh of relief. He wiped the sweat off his forehead with his sleeve. His face was a little pale and he looked a little tired. He said to Qinlan, "Young Master Lan, I didn't let you down. I've finished refining." Qinlan forced a smile. "Uncle Yen, you've worked hard. However, young Master Tianqing finished refining 12 hours ago." Uncle Yen was stunned. He said dejectedly, "I didn't expect that I would still lose after giving it my all." Qinlan hurriedly comforted him. "Don't worry. Let's wait until everyone sees your work. Perhaps your artifact will be more exquisite than his?" Uncle Yen nodded and opened the cauldron lid. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 3476. Swoosh. The lid of the cauldron opened and a white rainbow flew into the air. A 4-foot-long sword was wrapped in the dazzling white rainbow. The sword was blazing white and had a dignified appearance. It rippled with a vigorous divine power aura. It contained 100 types of divine Dao laws and 1,000 types of divine formations and restrictions. Compared to Qinlan and Zhang Tiany's works, this sword could only be considered average and not outstanding. Qinlan was a little disappointed. He had already guessed the outcome. However, he still had a trace of hope and hope. He looked at Ji Tianqing and said, "Young Master Tianqing, it's your turn." Ji Tianqing did not waste any time. He waved his hand and opened the lid of the 9 heavens cauldron. Swoosh. A dazzling icy blue divine light bloomed from the cauldron and slowly rose into the air. The entire hall was illuminated with an icy blue color. It was like a palace of ice and snow. Following the appearance of an exquisite and gorgeous divine armor, the entire hall turned into a hall of extreme cold. Frost formed everywhere. Everyone ignored the bone-piercing cold. They stared at the icy blue armor and observed it carefully. This divine armor is too beautiful. This should be for a woman to wear, right? Jiang Tianqing exclaimed from the bottom of his heart. It's so exquisite and gorgeous. The patterns on the armor are also original. It's really admirable. Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang were excited. Their expressions were filled with admiration and worship. Even Qinlan had to admit that this divine armor was indeed a divine item. It was a 1 in 1,000 masterpiece. Jiang Tiany observed it carefully for a while before saying, "It's really a low-grade king-grade divine artifact. And it's a supreme-grade one. Whether it's the difficulty of refining or the quality, it far surpasses the bloody slaughter sword that I refined and the sword that Qinlan refined." Jiang Tiany was sincerely impressed. However, before he could finish, Qinlan said indignantly, "I don't deny that it surpasses your bloody slaughter sword. However, it surpasses my divine sword. Are you sure?" Jiang Tiany turned to look at him and nodded expressionlessly. "I'm very sure. First of all, refining an armor is more complicated and time-consuming than a divine sword. Secondly, young Master Tianqing only used 8 sets of materials. You used 9 sets. This is enough to prove that young Master Tianqing's attainments in refining artifacts are superior to yours. Most importantly, take a closer look at this divine armor. How many laws and restrictions does it contain?" Qinlan was stunned. She looked at the ice-blue divine armor again and observed it carefully. After a short moment, his figure shook while his expression stiffened, and he couldn't help but exclaim with shock. 130 divine crests of the laws? More than 1,300 restrictions? Oh my god. It's only been 7 days, how could he? Qinlan was completely dumbfounded. He was so shocked that his blood was boiling and his entire body was burning. At this moment, winning or losing was no longer important. He just wanted to know how Ji Tianqing did it. Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang were also stunned. They looked at Ji Tianqing with eyes full of respect and admiration. The hall fell into silence. Uncle Yen put away the divine cauldron and divine sword. He broke the silence and said in a low voice, "We have lost the second round." His words woke everyone up. Only then did Qinlan come back to his senses. He regained his confidence and composure and grinned. Even if young Master Tianqing won, it's nothing. It's all within my expectations anyway. Now that we are tied, we have to wait for the 3rd round to determine the winner." With that said, Qinlan looked at Jiang Tiany provocatively and curled his finger. "Jiang Tiany, my divine power and condition have both recovered to their peak. You can admit defeat in advance. Jiang Tianyi immediately frowned and his expression became serious. That's right. So what if Ji Tianqing won the first round? He still had to go up for the third round and have a final battle with Qianlan. He had only recovered 90% and was not at his peak condition. It was very difficult to win against Qianlan. Jiang Tianyi was originally very happy, but when he thought of this problem he became depressed. Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang also looked at Jiang Tianyi, waiting for him to make a decision. Should he compete with Qianlan and lose? Or should he save his energy and time and admit defeat directly? Just as everyone was waiting for Jiang Tianyi to make a decision, a calm voice sounded. The third round will still be mine. Everyone was stunned for a moment and turned their heads. Without a doubt, the person who spoke was Ji Tianqing. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianyi both frowned and asked worriedly, "Young Master Tianqing, aren't you going to rest for a few days?" Although the two of them said the same thing, their thoughts were different. Jiang Tianyi was worried that Ji Tianqing's continuous forging of divine weapons would damage his foundation of the divine path. Jiang Tianyi, on the other hand, was worried that Ji Tianqing would lose to Qianlan due to his lack of strength in the third round. Qianlan raised his eyebrows and asked with a playful smile, "Young Master Tianqing, your forging skills are indeed extraordinary. However, you have just finished forging a divine weapon. Are you sure you want to continue? Don't say that I took advantage of you by not letting you rest and recuperate. You asked for it yourself." Clearly, Qianlan was not worried about losing at all. If Jiang Tianyi participated in the third round, he would definitely lose. If Ji Tianqing continued, he would not have much chance of winning in a situation where he did not have enough divine power and was mentally exhausted. No matter what, Qianlan was sure to win. Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said indifferently, "It's only been 7 days. I didn't use much divine power. Do I still need to rest and recuperate?" Qianlan choked on her words and said in exasperation, "Fine. Since you are so confident, let's wait and see." Jiang Tianyi wanted to persuade Ji Tianqing but was stopped by Jiang Tianyi. He transmitted his voice to Jiang Tianyi. "Ninth brother, young Master Tianqing's strength and methods are far beyond our imagination. Since he is so confident, we will definitely win." Jiang Tianyi was skeptical. After hesitating for a long time, he finally acquiesced. On the other side, Uncle Yan reminded Qianlan, "Young Master Lan, that kid's forging skills are so shocking. You must not let your guard down." Qianlan nodded to show that he understood and said with a smile, "If I had competed with him just now, I would definitely have lost. His forging skills are indeed brilliant. However, he has just finished forging a divine weapon. His divine power must be empty and his mind exhausted. I, on the other hand, am in peak condition. Why should I be afraid of losing to him?" Uncle Yan was speechless. He could only remind him, "In any case, young Master Lan, you must give it your all." "Right, I understand." Qianlan waved his hand and walked to the main hall to sit down. He took out the divine cauldron and looked at Ji Tianqing opposite him. "Shall we begin?" Ji Tianqing raised his hand and said, "Wait. This third round will determine the winner. If we compete like this, it will be too monotonous." Qianlan frowned. "What? You know that your divine power is insufficient and want to change the rules?" Ji Tianqing smiled and said, "It's boring to just forge a low-grade king-level divine weapon. Why don't we upgrade the divine weapon we just forged to mid-grade?" "Upgrade a low-grade divine weapon?" Qianlan frowned and pondered seriously. After weighing the pros and cons, he gritted his teeth and made a decision. "Fine." Ji Tianqing smiled and said, "Why don't we add some stakes? Otherwise it will be boring for everyone to watch." Book Guest House Reading Website.